The headlights cut through the blizzard like 20 ghosts rising from hell itself, and Caleb Mercer knew his world was about to change. He stood at the window of his dying mountain lodge, bankruptcy papers spread across the desk behind him, his 8-year-old daughter asleep upstairs, and watched the motorcycles circle his property like wolves surrounding wounded prey. In 30 days, the bank would take everything. He had nothing left to give strangers seeking shelter from the storm. But when the lead rider removed her helmet and their eyes met through the snow, Caleb understood that sometimes salvation arrives on 2 wheels wearing leather and carrying secrets of its own. If you're watching from somewhere warm tonight, drop your city in the comments below. I want to see how far this story travels. And if it speaks to you, hit that like button. Now settle in, because what happened next changed everything. The wind screamed against the windows of Blackridge Mountain Lodge like it wanted inside. Wanted to tear apart what little remained of Caleb Mercer's carefully constructed life. He stood in the great room, surrounded by furniture covered in dusty sheets, and watched the snowfall accelerate from concerning to catastrophic in the span of 15 minutes. 43 years old, former Marine, single father, failed businessman. The categories of his life had gotten depressingly simple. Daddy? Arya's voice drifted down from upstairs, small and uncertain in the way that made his chest constrict. The wind is loud. I know, sweetheart. Caleb moved to the stairs, his knee, the one that ended his military career, protesting the cold. It's just a storm. We're safe. Safe. The word tasted like ash in his mouth. In 30 days, the bank would foreclose. Safe was a luxury he could no longer afford. He climbed the stairs slowly, finding Arya standing in the hallway outside her bedroom, her hands pressed over her ears. At 8 years old, she was small for her age, with dark hair that fell in messy waves around a face that looked so much like her mother's it sometimes hurt to look at her. The wind has a pattern, Arya said, not looking at him. She rarely made eye contact, even with him. It goes whoosh, 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 whoosh. 3 beats, over and over. You're right. Caleb knelt, bringing himself to her level without touching her. She didn't like to be touched without warning. You always hear the patterns, don't you? Everything has patterns, Arya said matter-of-factly. Except people. People are chaos. Caleb felt his heart crack a little. Some people, not all of them. 97%, Arya corrected. I calculated. Despite everything, he smiled. How about we get you back to bed? I'll stay until you fall asleep. Will you tell me about the constellations again? Always. He tucked her in, watching as she arranged her stuffed animals in precise geometric patterns across the bed. Order from chaos. It was how Arya made sense of a world that often felt too loud, too bright, too overwhelming. Orion is the hunter, Caleb began, reciting the familiar stories. And those 3 stars in his belt are Alnitak, Alnilam, and Mintaka, Arya finished. Approximately 800 light-years away. Well, Alnilam is 2,000 light-years away, but the others are closer together. Right. He'd learned years ago not to simplify things for her. Arya's mind didn't work that way. She wanted precision, truth, the underlying mathematics of everything. He stayed until her breathing evened out, until her hands unclenched from the blanket. Then he crept back downstairs, back to the great room. Back to the bankruptcy papers and the impossible calculations that never came out right no matter how many times he ran them. The lodge had been his father's dream. 20 rooms built with his own hands over the course of a decade, positioned perfectly to capture sunrise views over the Rockies. It had thrived once, families on vacation, corporate retreats, wedding parties seeking mountain magic. Then his father died. Then Caleb's knee got shattered by an IED outside Kandahar. Then his marriage to Jennifer collapsed under the weight of Arya's diagnosis and his PTSD and the fundamental incompatibility of 2 people who'd married too young for all the wrong reasons. Jennifer had moved to Seattle, sent child support when she remembered, called Arya on birthdays. She loved their daughter, Caleb never doubted that. But she couldn't handle the daily reality of autism, couldn't manage the meltdowns and the strict routines and the special diets. So Arya stayed with him. And Caleb learned to be enough. Except he wasn't. Not anymore. The medical bills had piled up. Specialists, therapies, evaluations that insurance barely covered. The lodge's income had dried up, as he struggled to maintain both the property and his daughter's needs. Repairs went undone. Reviews turned negative. Bookings disappeared. Now the bank wanted its money, and Caleb had exactly $347 in his checking account. He was staring at the foreclosure notice, trying to figure out how to tell Arya they'd have to move, when the headlights appeared. At first he thought he was hallucinating. Nobody came up the mountain road in weather like this. The storm had closed the highway 2 hours ago, and the local news was calling it the worst blizzard in a decade. But the lights kept coming. One, then another, then another. A procession of motorcycles crawling through the snow with an almost supernatural determination. Caleb moved to the window, pressing his face against the cold glass. 20 bikes, maybe more, all cruising in formation toward his lodge. The lead rider was tall, commanding even from a distance, and when she swung off the motorcycle and removed her helmet, Caleb saw a woman in her late 30s with sharp features and eyes that seemed to assess everything in a single glance. She looked directly at him through the window. Then she walked to his door and knocked. Caleb's hand hesitated on the doorknob. Every instinct told him to be cautious. He was alone up here with his daughter, no cell service, no backup. These could be anyone, gang members, thieves, worse. But the woman knocked again, steady and patient, and when Caleb finally opened the door, the blast of cold air that hit him was nothing compared to the intensity of her gaze. "We need shelter," she said simply. Her voice was cultured, controlled, not what he'd expected from someone leading a motorcycle convoy through a blizzard. "The highway's closed. We can't make it back down the mountain. I know this is your home, and I know we're strangers, but I'm asking anyway." Behind her, the other riders had dismounted, all women, all watching him with varying degrees of hope and exhaustion. They looked cold, wet, professional, not threatening, just desperate. Caleb looked back toward the stairs, toward where Arya slept. He thought about the lodge, about the 20 empty rooms that mocked him with their vacancy. He thought about honor, about the oath he'd taken years ago to protect those who couldn't protect themselves. "How many?" he asked. 22 total, the woman said. We can pay." "I wasn't asking about payment." Caleb stepped back, opening the door wider. "I was asking so I know how many rooms to prepare." Something shifted in the woman's expression, surprise, maybe, or relief. She extended her hand. "Valentina Knox." "Caleb Mercer." Her handshake was firm, professional. "Welcome to Black Ridge Lodge. Let's get everyone inside before you all freeze." The next 30 minutes were controlled chaos. 22 women filed into the great room, bringing with them the smell of leather and cold air and motorcycle exhaust. They were diverse, different ages, different backgrounds, but they all moved with similar efficiency, helping each other with gear, checking on the bikes, establishing a perimeter of competence. Caleb found himself relegated to the role of observer in his own home as they organized themselves with military precision. Within minutes, they'd assessed the space, distributed themselves across the available rooms, and started an inventory of supplies. "Bathroom situation?" asked a woman with bright red hair and approximately 17 piercings. "4 bathrooms upstairs, 2 down," Caleb answered. "Hot water's working, but sometimes takes a while to heat up." "Kitchen?" This from an older woman, maybe 60, with silver braids and laugh lines. "Through there. It's functional. I can make—" "We'll handle meals," Valentina interrupted gently. "You've done enough by letting us in. We're not here to be waited on." Caleb opened his mouth to argue. Hospitality had been his father's religion, and Caleb had been raised to take care of guests. But something in Valentina's expression stopped him. This wasn't about being difficult. This was about dignity. They didn't want to be charity cases. He understood that better than most. "All right," he said, "but if you need anything, you ask. This is still my lodge." Valentina smiled. "Fair enough." A crash from upstairs sent Caleb's heart into his throat. He was moving before he thought, taking the stairs 2 at a time despite his knee, because that sound meant Arya, meant distress, meant— He found her in the hallway, surrounded by 3 of the riders who'd apparently gone upstairs to find rooms. Arya was backed against the wall, hands over her ears, eyes squeezed shut, making the high-pitched keening sound that meant she was overwhelmed. "Back up," Caleb ordered, pushing through to his daughter. "Give her space." The women immediately stepped back, and Caleb knelt in front of Arya without touching her. "Hey, sweetheart, I'm here. You're safe." "Too many people," Arya whispered. "Too many voices. Too many footsteps. The patterns are all wrong." "I know. I'm sorry. There are some people staying here tonight because of the storm, but they'll be quiet now, right?" He looked over his shoulder at the three riders, who nodded quickly. "We're so sorry," one of them started, but Caleb held up a hand. "Not now. Words would just be more noise." He sat down on the floor next to Arya, giving her space but staying close. Eventually her hands lowered. Eventually her breathing slowed. "Constellations?" she asked quietly. "Constellations," Caleb confirmed. He pointed out her window, even though the storm obscured the stars. "Cassiopeia is up there tonight, the queen sitting in her chair." "5 stars," Arya said, "in a W shape, also called the celestial W." "That's right." They sat in silence for a few minutes while the three riders watched from a respectful distance. Finally, Arya looked at them, not at their faces, but at a point somewhere around their shoulders. "You have motorcycles," she observed. "We do," said the red-haired woman, speaking softly. 22 of them, mostly Harleys, but I've got a Triumph." "What's the average displacement?" The woman blinked. Probably around 1,200 cubic centimeters. Some are bigger." "That's a lot of power," Arya said. "Do you calculate fuel efficiency?" "Sometimes. I'm Harper, by the way. Harper Quinn." "I'm Arya. I'm 8 years old and I have autism spectrum disorder, and I know all 88 constellations." Harper smiled, a genuine smile that reached her eyes. "That's 88 more than I know. Would you teach me sometime?" Arya considered this. "Maybe, if you're not too loud." "I can be quiet." Caleb felt something ease in his chest. Not everyone knew how to talk to Arya. Not everyone tried. Harper had just passed a test she didn't even know she was taking. "Time for bed, sweetheart," he said gently. "For real this time." Arya nodded and went back to her room without argument. Caleb closed the door and turned to the three riders. "I apologize," he started, but Harper cut him off. "Don't. We should have been quieter. Is she okay?" "She will be." Arya processes sensory input differently than most people. Too much stimulation overwhelms her system. He paused, weighing how much to share. "She's amazing, brilliant, but the world is often too much for her." "My nephew has autism," said one of the other women, a tall black woman with kind eyes. "Verbal stimming, needs weighted blankets. He's the coolest kid I know." Caleb felt his defenses lower slightly. "Yeah, they're pretty incredible." "We'll keep the noise down," Harper promised, "and if there's anything we can do to make this easier for her, or for you, just say the word." He nodded, not trusting himself to speak. When had someone last offered to make things easier for him? Downstairs, the lodge had transformed. Someone had started a fire in the massive stone fireplace. The dusty sheets had been removed from the furniture. Women sat in clusters, talking quietly, while others organized gear and supplies with practiced efficiency. Valentina found him at the bottom of the stairs. "Everything all right?" "Fine. Arya just got overwhelmed by the sudden activity." "Understandable. We'll make sure to be considerate." She paused. "You have a remarkable daughter." "I know." "And a beautiful property. Even half-maintained, it's stunning." Caleb laughed bitterly. "You're kind to phrase it that way. The truth is, the place is falling apart, and I don't have the money to fix it." He didn't know why he said it. Didn't know why he was confessing his failures to a complete stranger, but Valentina just nodded like she'd already guessed. "Things fall apart," she said quietly. "It doesn't mean they can't be rebuilt." "Sometimes it does." "Maybe, but not always." She gestured to her group. "We're proof of that. Every woman here has rebuilt from rubble at least once." Caleb looked around the room with fresh eyes. Now that he was paying attention, he could see it, the subtle signs of strength earned through survival. Scars, both visible and invisible. The kind of grace that only comes from learning to stand up after being knocked down. "Who are you people?" he asked. Valentina smiled. "A charity motorcycle club. We ride for trauma survivors, domestic violence, veteran PTSD, sexual assault. We raise money, awareness, community. And once a year, we do this ride through the Rockies to honor the women who didn't make it out. Her voice softened. We've lost too many. Caleb felt something shift in his understanding. These weren't just random strangers. They were warriors in their own right. I'm sorry for your losses, he said. Thank you. But we're also here to celebrate survival, resilience. The fact that broken doesn't mean defeated. She met his eyes. I suspect you understand that better than most. He did. God, he did. The red-haired woman, Harper, appeared with steaming mugs. Made coffee. Found your kitchen. Hope that's okay. It's fine. Caleb accepted a mug gratefully. The coffee was strong, dark, perfect. So, Valentina said, settling into one of the armchairs. Tell me about this place. It's clearly been here a while. My father built it, Caleb found himself saying. Took him 10 years. He had this vision of creating a sanctuary, somewhere people could come to escape their everyday lives, reconnect with nature, find peace. Sounds like a good man. He was. Caleb swallowed hard. He died 5 years ago. Heart attack. Quick, at least. I'm sorry. They sat in silence for a moment, watching the fire. Around them, the other women had settled into comfortable conversations, sharing trail mix, charging phones, making plans for the morning when the roads would hopefully clear. You're military, Valentina observed. It wasn't a question. Marine Corps. 8 years. Medically discharged after an IED took out my knee. That explains the way you carry yourself. Once a Marine, always a Marine. Something like that. Caleb stretched his bad leg. Doesn't help much with running a lodge, though. Can't climb ladders, can't shovel snow for more than 20 minutes without the joint swelling up. Hard to do repairs when your body won't cooperate. You manage anyway. Not well enough. The admission escaped before he could stop it. The bank's foreclosing in 30 days. I'm out of options, out of time, out of money. Valentina was quiet for a long moment. What would you do if you could save it? I don't know anymore. When my father was alive, this place had soul. Guests came back year after year. They brought their kids, their grandkids. It meant something. Caleb stared into his coffee. Now it's just me trying to keep the roof from caving in while I raise a daughter who needs more than I can give her. What does Arya need? Specialized therapy, occupational, speech, social skills training. There's this program in Denver that could really help her, but it's $800 a session, and insurance covers exactly none of it. He laughed without humor. Instead, we do the best we can with YouTube videos and library books. That must be frustrating. It's devastating. She's so smart, so capable, but the world isn't built for kids like her, and I don't have the resources to bridge that gap. Harper had drifted over during the conversation. What's her special interest? Most autistic kids have something they hyper-focus on. Astronomy, Caleb said immediately. Stars, constellations, planetary movements. She can tell you the orbital period of Saturn and the composition of Jupiter's atmosphere. She tracks meteor showers in a notebook and corrects me when I get the names wrong. That's incredible. It is. I just wish I could nurture it better. She should have a telescope, access to planetarium programs, maybe even summer camp at an observatory. He shook his head. Instead, she gets me pointing at the sky and making up stories. Stories matter too, Valentina said quietly. Maybe, but they didn't pay for therapy or save failing businesses. The wind picked up outside, rattling the windows. The women stirred, a few getting up to check on the motorcycles despite the weather. They moved like a unit, watching out for each other, and Caleb felt a pang of something he couldn't quite name. Loneliness, maybe. He'd been doing this alone for so long. You should get some sleep, Valentina suggested. It's late, and I imagine you've got an early morning ahead of you. I usually do. Caleb stood, wincing as his knee protested. There are extra blankets in the closet at the top of the stairs. Help yourselves. And if you need anything during the night, we'll be fine, Harper assured him. We're used to roughing it. This isn't roughing it. This is warm and dry. Trust me, we've had worse. Caleb wanted to ask where wanted to hear their stories, but exhaustion was pulling at him like a riptide. He said goodnight and climbed the stairs, checking on Arya before collapsing into his own bed. Sleep didn't come easily. He lay awake, listening to the storm rage and the low murmur of voices downstairs, and wondered what the hell he'd just done by letting 22 armed strangers into his failing lodge. But somewhere in the darkness, between the wind and worry, he felt something he hadn't felt in months. Hope. Maybe it was foolish. Maybe it would only make the inevitable crash harder. But for tonight, alone in the dark with strangers in his home and his daughter sleeping safely down the hall, Caleb let himself believe that sometimes storms brought more than just destruction. Sometimes they brought witnesses to your breaking. And sometimes, if you were very lucky, those witnesses knew how to help you rebuild. Morning arrived with surprising silence. The storm had passed overnight, leaving behind a world transformed by snow. Caleb woke to the smell of coffee and bacon, real breakfast smells he hadn't experienced in his own kitchen in months. He found Arya already awake, sitting at the dining room table with Harper and 2 other women. They were making paper snowflakes, cutting intricate patterns, while Arya explained the mathematical principles of 6-fold radial symmetry. Because ice crystals form in hexagonal structures, Arya was saying, holding up a perfect snowflake. So all snowflakes have 6 sides or 6 points, never 5, never 8, always 6. Science is cool, Harper said, admiring Arya's work. You're basically an ice crystal expert. I'm an astronomy expert, Arya corrected, but I know 17 other subjects at an advanced level. 17? That's more than I'll learn in my entire life. Arya considered this seriously. You could learn them if you wanted. Your brain has approximately 86 billion neurons. That's a lot of processing power. Caleb smiled despite himself. Only Arya could make social interaction sound like a computer specs discussion. In the kitchen, Valentina was coordinating breakfast with 3 other women like they'd been working together for years. Eggs, bacon, toast, fresh fruit somehow procured from somewhere. The kitchen was cleaner than he'd seen it in months. You didn't have to do this, Caleb said. We wanted to. Consider it payment for the shelter. Valentina handed him a plate loaded with food. Besides, you've got 22 hungry bikers to feed. Seemed easier to do it ourselves. Still, thank you. He ate standing up, watching his lodge come alive in ways it hadn't in years. The women moved through the space with easy familiarity, helping with cleanup, organizing gear, checking weather reports on phones that had regained service overnight. Road's still closed, reported a woman with intricate tattoos covering both arms. Highway Patrol says at least 2 more days before they can clear it. Caleb's heart sank. 2 more days meant 2 more days of mouths to feed, bodies to shelter, chaos to manage. We'll cover supplies, Valentina said, reading his expression. And we'll help with whatever needs doing around here. Consider it a fair trade. You don't need to pup, Caleb. She met his eyes directly. Let us help. We're not here to be served. We're here to contribute. So put us to work. He thought about refusing. Thought about pride and independence and all the reasons he'd been doing this alone. Then he thought about the hole in the roof of room 7, the broken pipe in the basement, the front steps that needed replacing before someone got hurt. All right, he said slowly. If you're serious, I've got a list about a mile long. Valentina smiled. We're serious. Let's see it. What happened next defied everything Caleb thought he understood about strangers and charity and help. Within 2 hours, the women had organized themselves into specialized teams. The ones with construction experience tackled the roof. A plumber in the group diagnosed and repaired the basement pipe. An electrician found and fixed wiring issues Caleb hadn't even known existed. Harper appointed herself Arya's guide, keeping his daughter engaged and calm while chaos unfolded around them. They built an elaborate blanket fort in the great room and named all the support beams after constellations. By lunch, the lodge had been transformed. Repairs he'd thought would take months or forever were done. The building looked alive again. I don't understand, Caleb said to Valentina as they surveyed the work. Who are you people really? She laughed. I told you, a motorcycle club. Motorcycle clubs don't usually have certified electricians and structural engineers. Ours does. Valentina leaned against the newly repaired railing. We're all professionals, Caleb. CEOs, doctors, lawyers, contractors. We have resources and skills, and we've all been where you are, drowning, desperate, convinced we had to do it alone. So this is charity. No, this is community. Her voice was firm. There's a difference. Charity is one-directional. Community is reciprocal. You gave us shelter. We're giving you labor. It's an equal exchange. It doesn't feel equal. Maybe not right now. But someday, when you're back on your feet, you'll help someone else who needs it. That's how this works. That's how we all survive. Caleb wanted to argue, but the evidence surrounded him. His lodge was being rebuilt by 22 women who owed him nothing. That evening, after another communal meal, Valentina asked to see his business plans. What business plans? Caleb laughed bitterly. I'm 30 days from foreclosure. There's no plan anymore. Show me the numbers anyway. So he did. He spread out bank statements and mortgage documents and medical bills across the dining room table. He showed her reservation records from 5 years ago versus now, the devastating decline in bookings, the reviews that mentioned broken amenities and lack of upkeep. Valentina studied it all in silence, making notes on a legal pad. 2 other women joined her. One introduced herself as a corporate attorney, the other as a CPA. They worked for 3 hours, asking questions, running calculations, making phone calls. Finally, Valentina looked up. Okay, she said. Here's what I see. Caleb braced himself for the confirmation of his failure. You've got a solid property in a prime location. Your foundation is sound, literally and figuratively. The building is well constructed and the land is valuable. Your problem isn't the business model, it's capital and capacity. I know, I can't afford to fix what's broken, and I can't run this place alone while taking care of Arya. Right, so let's solve both problems. She slid a piece of paper across the table. On it, she'd outlined 3 different options. Option 1, partner with her tech company for guaranteed corporate retreats, providing stable income. Option 2, form an investment group to renovate the lodge into a premier veteran-focused retreat center, with Caleb maintaining operational control. Option 3, help him sell at a fair price and relocate somewhere more manageable for Arya's needs. Caleb stared at the paper, unable to process what he was seeing. Why would you do this? Because I can. Because you need it. Because that's what we do. Valentina's expression softened. I run a tech company worth $200 million, Caleb. I have resources I'll never spend, and I've learned that money sitting in accounts doesn't change lives. Money invested in people does. This is an investment. This is rescue. No. Rescue implies you're helpless. You're not. You're skilled, dedicated, and you've kept this place alive through circumstances that would have destroyed most people. You just need backup. She tapped the paper. These aren't charity offers. They're business propositions. If you choose option 1 or 2, I expect returns. I expect excellence. I expect you to work harder than you've ever worked. And if I choose option 3, then I respect that. Some fights aren't worth winning. Some mountains are better descended than climbed. Caleb looked at Arya, sleeping peacefully on the couch nearby, Harper keeping watch. He thought about his father's dream, his own stubborn refusal to give up, the lodge as it could be, as it should be. I need time to think. Of course, but Caleb, Valentina met his eyes. Whatever you decide, you're not alone anymore. That's not conditional. That's just fact. That night, unable to sleep, Caleb stood at the window watching moonlight on snow. Behind him, the lodge was quiet. 22 women sleeping in rooms he'd thought he'd never fill again. For the first time in years, Caleb Mercer allowed himself to imagine a future that wasn't defined by loss. And when Arya found him there in the darkness, asking why he was crying, he told her the truth. Sometimes tears are happy, sweetheart. Sometimes they mean hope. Is hope good? She asked. Caleb pulled his daughter close, feeling her tolerate the embrace. Yeah, he whispered. Hope is very good. Outside, the storm had passed completely. The sky was clear, stars brilliant against infinite black. Somewhere up there, all 88 constellations waited to be named. And down here, in a lodge on a mountain, a broken man began to believe he could be whole again. The decision kept Caleb awake until dawn. He sat at the kitchen table with Valentina's 3 options spread before him like tarot cards predicting possible futures. Through the window, the first light caught on snow-covered pines, turning the world into something from Arya's favorite astronomy book. Distant, beautiful, impossibly vast. Partnership, investment, sale. Three paths. Three versions of himself he couldn't quite visualize. "You're up early." Valentina appeared in the doorway, already dressed, her hair pulled back in a practical ponytail. "Or did you sleep at all?" "Not much." Caleb rubbed his face. "I keep running the numbers. Keep trying to see how any of this works." "The numbers work. I wouldn't have presented them otherwise." She poured herself coffee from the pot he'd started an hour ago. "But numbers aren't really what's keeping you awake, are they?" "No." He looked at her directly. "What's keeping me awake is wondering what the catch is. Nobody does this. Nobody shows up in a storm and offers to save a stranger's entire life." Valentina sat across from him, cradling her mug. "You're right. Most people don't. But most people haven't lived the kind of life that teaches you how much one person helping another can matter." "What kind of life have you lived?" She was quiet for a long moment, staring into her coffee like it held answers. "The kind where I learned that success doesn't insulate you from violence, that money doesn't protect you from the people who are supposed to love you, that sometimes the only thing standing between you and destruction is a stranger who decides to give a damn." Caleb heard what she wasn't saying. "Domestic violence?" "For 3 years. My ex-husband was charming, successful, connected. Nobody believed me when I finally found the courage to speak up. His family had lawyers. I had bruises and a restraining order that wasn't worth the paper it was printed on." Her voice remained steady, matter of fact. "A woman I barely knew, a paralegal at my company, helped me disappear. New identity, new city, new life. She risked her career, maybe her safety, to help me escape." "What happened to your ex?" "He married someone else 6 months later. I heard she left him too, eventually. Some men never change." Valentina met his eyes. "But I did. I built my company from nothing, made my first million at 32, and I swore that if I ever had the chance to be for someone else what that paralegal was for me, I wouldn't hesitate." Caleb absorbed this, understanding clicking into place. "So this is you paying it forward. This is me remembering what it feels like to be trapped by circumstances you didn't create and can't control. To have people who could help choose not to, because it's inconvenient or complicated or just not their problem." She set down her mug. "You didn't have to let us in during that storm. You could have turned us away, protected yourself and Arya. But you opened the door. That tells me everything I need to know about the kind of man you are." "I'm not special. Anyone would have—" "No, they wouldn't have. I've been turned away from establishments with vacancy signs lit up and doors locked against the cold. I've been told there's no room when I could see empty tables through the window. You saw 22 strangers on motorcycles and still opened your door." She leaned forward. "That's not nothing, Caleb. That's character. And character is what I invest in." "Even if I choose option 3? Even if I walk away?" "Even then. Because sometimes the bravest thing you can do is admit when a fight is killing you and choose to live instead." Valentina's expression softened. "There's no wrong answer here. Only what's right for you and Arya." Footsteps on the stairs interrupted them. Harper appeared, followed by Arya, who was already dressed and carrying her astronomy notebook. "Morning," Harper said cheerfully. "Found this one awake and ready to tell me about something called the Kuiper Belt." "It's the region of the solar system beyond Neptune," Arya explained without preamble. "It contains dwarf planets like Pluto, Haumea, and Makemake, also approximately 1 trillion comets." 1 trillion? That's a lot of ice balls. Harper grinned at Caleb. "Your daughter is basically a walking encyclopedia." "I'm not walking right now," Arya corrected. "I'm standing. But yes, I know a lot about space." Caleb felt his heart constrict watching them together. Harper had somehow cracked the code in 2 days that most adults never managed, treating Arya like a person, not a problem, listening without trying to fix or change or normalize. "Who wants breakfast?" Valentina asked, standing. "I'm thinking pancakes." "Can we make them in constellation shapes?" Arya asked. "Absolutely. You'll have to show me how." Within minutes, the kitchen filled with women in various states of wakefulness, all gravitating toward coffee and conversation. Caleb found himself pushed to the sidelines again, watching his lodge transform into something alive and communal. The attorney from last night, her name was Rebecca, cornered him while Arya and Harper made pancakes shaped like Ursa Major. "I made some calls about your foreclosure situation," Rebecca said without preamble. "Your bank is First Mountain Federal, right?" "Right. They sent the 30-day notice 3 weeks ago." "Okay, here's what I found. They're legally required to offer you options before foreclosure, loan modification, forbearance, short sale. Did they present those?" Caleb tried to remember. "There was paperwork, a lot of it. I probably signed something." Probably isn't good enough. If they didn't properly explain your options, didn't give you adequate time to explore alternatives, we might be able to delay the foreclosure. Maybe even challenge it. Rebecca pulled out her phone. "I need you to gather every piece of correspondence from the bank. Letters, emails, statements, everything." "What good will that do? I still can't make the payments." "Maybe not the current payments, but if we can prove they didn't follow proper procedure, we can buy time. Time to restructure the debt, time to find alternative funding, time to implement Valentina's proposals." She looked at him seriously. "Time is the most valuable commodity in a situation like this. Let me get you some." "Why would you do this?" "You don't even know me." Rebecca smiled. "I'm a lawyer who specializes in helping people screw over banks that cut corners. This is literally my favorite thing to do. Plus," Valentina asked, "and I owe her more favors than I can count." "What did she do for you?" "Believed me when my firm was trying to force me out for being gay. Hired me as general counsel for her company and paid me 3 times what the old firm did." Rebecca's expression turned fierce. "Valentina saves people. It's just what she does. So when she says someone's worth fighting for, I suit up." Caleb didn't know what to say. The idea that all of this, the repairs, the legal help, the business proposals, came from genuine care rather than pity or obligation was almost harder to accept than failure. "I'll get you the paperwork," he managed. "Good. I'll review it today, and we'll talk strategy tonight." The day unfolded with surprising normalcy. Valentina organized work crews to tackle the remaining repairs, while others ventured into the snow to secure the motorcycles and assess road conditions. Harper kept Arya engaged with projects that somehow balanced sensory-friendly activities with genuine fun. They built elaborate structures from playing cards, organized Arya's rock collection by mineral composition, and had lengthy discussions about whether black holes could be considered the universe's recycling bins. Caleb spent the morning with Rebecca, going through 3 years of bank correspondence. She made notes, asked pointed questions, and occasionally swore under her breath. "This is garbage," she muttered, holding up a letter. "This modification offer is deliberately confusing. The terms are buried in Section 8, subsection C, written in language designed to discourage acceptance." "I didn't understand most of it," Caleb admitted. "That's intentional. Banks count on people being overwhelmed and just giving up." Rebecca's fingers flew across her laptop keyboard. "But here's what they failed to account for. Someone actually reading this crap and knowing what to look for. They missed a mandatory 30-day waiting period. They didn't provide proper notice of your right to housing counseling. And this assessment fee? Completely bogus." "What does that mean?" "It means we have grounds to delay the foreclosure and potentially negotiate a settlement. They screwed up, Caleb, and that gives us leverage." For the first time in months, Caleb felt something besides despair when thinking about the bank. "How much time can you buy me?" 3 months minimum, 6 if we're aggressive. Maybe longer if they really don't want this getting in front of a judge who's already hostile to predatory lending practices. Rebecca looked up from her laptop. "But time alone won't save you. You need a viable path forward." "I know. So, what are you thinking? Partnership, investment group, or sale?" Caleb looked out the window at his father's lodge, at the land his family had owned for 2 generations. He thought about Arya and the life he wanted to give her. He thought about pride and practicality and the terrifying prospect of trusting strangers. "I don't know yet," he said honestly. "Fair enough. Just don't wait too long. Opportunity has an expiration date." That afternoon, a woman named Sandra, the one who'd mentioned her autistic nephew, asked to speak with Caleb privately. "I'm a special education teacher," she explained as they walked the perimeter of the property, boots crunching through snow. 20 years in the field, and I wanted to talk to you about Arya. Caleb's defenses rose automatically. If this is about her behavior, it's not. She's delightful, smart, creative, articulate, but I notice she doesn't have many accommodations in place. No AAC device, no visual schedule, no sensory toolkit. I know, I can't afford those things right now. I'm not judging. I'm offering to help. Sandra pulled out her phone. There are grants specifically for families with autistic children. Equipment assistance programs. Sometimes school districts will provide resources, even if you're homeschooling. I can help you apply for all of it. Why would you do that? Because I've seen too many brilliant kids fall through the cracks because their families didn't know what resources existed. And because helping Arya helps you, which helps this whole situation become sustainable. Sandra showed him a list on her phone. These are programs I've successfully accessed for other families. Some are income-based, some aren't. But between all of them, we could probably get Arya a decent support system without you paying out of pocket. Caleb stared at the list, vision blurring. I didn't know any of this existed. Most people don't. The system is deliberately opaque, but that's what I do. I navigate it for families who don't have time to become experts in special education law. She sent the list to his phone. I'll help you with the applications. We'll get Arya what she needs. I can't pay you. I'm not asking you to. Consider it professional development. Sandra smiled. Besides, any excuse to stick it to bureaucracy is a good day for me. They walked in silence for a moment, the mountain air crisp and clean. Finally, Sandra spoke again. Can I ask you something personal? Caleb nodded. What do you want for Arya, long term? If money and circumstances weren't issues, what would her life look like? No one had ever asked him that. Everyone always focused on limitations, on managing symptoms, on what Arya couldn't do. I want her to feel understood, Caleb said slowly. I want her to know that being different doesn't mean being less. I want her to have access to the stars she loves so much. I want her to find people who appreciate her brilliance instead of being intimidated by it. His voice caught. I want her to be happy, whatever that looks like for her. Those are good wants, achievable wants. Sandra stopped walking. And keeping this lodge might actually help accomplish them. You've got 20 acres of minimal light pollution, perfect for stargazing. You've got space to create sensory-friendly environments. You've got the potential to build something that accommodates her needs instead of forcing her to adapt to everyone else's. Or I could sell, move somewhere with better access to services, give her stability. Stability is good, but so is purpose. So is legacy. So is showing your daughter that sometimes you fight for what matters, even when it's hard. Sandra met his eyes. I'm not telling you what to decide. I'm just saying both options have merit. Trust yourself to know which one is right. That evening, Valentina called a group meeting. All 22 women gathered in the great room, settling onto furniture and floor space with practiced ease. Arya sat on Harper's lap, tolerating the contact in a way that made Caleb's heart ache. We've been here 3 days, Valentina began. The roads are supposed to open tomorrow, which means we need to make a decision about what happens next. I vote we stay until spring, someone called out, prompting laughter. I appreciate the sentiment, but Caleb needs to make some choices about his future. And those choices affect whether we can continue helping or if our involvement ends when we ride out of here. Valentina looked at Caleb. So I'm putting it to you. Do you want to share where you're at, or do you need more time? Every eye in the room turned to him. Caleb felt the weight of expectation, of hope, of 22 women who'd invested 3 days of labor and care into a stranger's failing dream. I don't know what to say, he admitted. 3 days ago, I was planning how to tell my daughter we were losing our home. Now, I've got options I never imagined, and people who care about outcomes they have no stake in. It's overwhelming. Take your time, Valentina said gently. We're not going anywhere tonight. But you're going somewhere, tomorrow probably. And then this all becomes theoretical again. Caleb stood, pacing. Here's what I know. This lodge is all I have left of my father. It's Arya's home, the only stability she's known since her mother left. The thought of losing it kills me. But the thought of dragging all of you into my mess, of taking help I might not be able to repay, of failing anyway and wasting everyone's time and money, that terrifies me more. What if you don't fail? Harper asked quietly. Arya was playing with Harper's rings, spinning them absently while listening to the conversation. Then I owe all of you more than I could repay in a lifetime. That's not how this works, Rebecca interjected. Valentina doesn't operate on debt. She operates on pay it forward. You succeed, you help someone else down the line. That's the only repayment anyone here wants. It can't be that simple. Why not? This from an older woman Caleb had learned was a retired colonel. You think we're incapable of altruism? That successful women can't have motivations beyond profit? That's not what I meant. I know what you meant. You meant that accepting help feels like admitting weakness, that real men solve their own problems, that asking for support is somehow shameful. The colonel's voice was firm, but not unkind. I spent 30 years in the military watching good soldiers destroy themselves because they thought asking for help was failure. Don't be that stupid, son. Caleb felt the truth of her words like a punch to the chest, because she was right. Some part of him, the part shaped by his father's bootstraps philosophy and Marine Corps self-reliance, believed that accepting help meant he'd failed as a man, as a father, as a son, carrying on a legacy. I'm scared, he said finally. The admission felt like jumping off a cliff. I'm scared of choosing wrong, scared of letting Arya down, scared of disappointing my father's memory, scared that even with all this help, I'll still lose everything. Silence filled the room. Then Arya spoke up, her voice clear and certain. Fear is a biological response to perceived danger, she said, still spinning Harper's rings. But you told me once that bravery isn't the absence of fear. It's choosing to act despite fear. She looked up at him then, making eye contact for a brief, precious moment. So be brave, Daddy. Choose. Something broke open in Caleb's chest. His 8-year-old daughter, who struggled with abstract concepts and emotional expression, had just articulated the exact truth he needed to hear. Okay, he said, his voice rough. Okay, here's what I want. He crossed to the table where Valentina's proposals still lay. He picked up option 2, the investment group, the veteran retreat center, the partnership that kept him in control. I want to fight for this place. I want to build something that honors what my father started and create something new. I want to give Arya a home where she belongs, and I want to help other veterans and families who are struggling like we were. He looked at Valentina. If you're serious about this, if you're really willing to invest, then yes, let's do it. The room erupted in applause and cheers. Arya covered her ears against the noise, but smiled. Harper whooped and spun Arya around, making her laugh, an actual laugh, bright and genuine. Valentina crossed to Caleb and extended her hand. Partners? Partners. He shook firmly. But I need to be clear. I can't be a silent participant. This has to be my work, my vision. I need to be in control of the day-to-day operations. Absolutely. You're the operator. We're just the capital and support structure. Valentina pulled out her phone. I'm going to start making calls. We'll need an architect to assess the property, a business consultant to develop the retreat concept, and Rebecca will handle the legal formation of the investment group. How fast can this happen? The foreclosure delay buys us 3 to 6 months. We can have plans drawn up in 4 weeks, start construction in 8, and be operational within 6 months if we move aggressively. She was already typing notes. But it's going to be intense, Caleb. Long hours, difficult decisions, constant pressure. Are you ready for that? Caleb thought about the last 3 years, managing his daughter's needs while running a failing business alone, PTSD nightmares and chronic pain, the crushing weight of debt and fear. He'd survived all of that in isolation. What could he accomplish with a team? I'm ready, he said. The next few hours were a whirlwind of planning. Women pulled out laptops and notepads, forming impromptu committees for different aspects of the project. The CPA started running projections. Rebecca drafted preliminary partnership agreements. Sandra researched therapeutic programs that could be integrated into a retreat center model. Harper and Arya had disappeared upstairs, and Caleb found them in Arya's room, surrounded by star charts and notebooks. We're designing an observatory, Harper explained. Well, Arya's designing it. I'm just asking questions. It needs a retractable roof, Arya was saying, sketching rapidly, and computer-controlled tracking, and it should be accessible for people in wheelchairs because some veterans have mobility issues. That's really thoughtful, Caleb said, sitting on the edge of her bed. It's logical. If we're making a retreat center for veterans, it should accommodate all veterans. Arya didn't look up from her drawing. Harper says her brother lost his legs in Afghanistan. He'd want to see stars, too. He would, Harper confirmed softly. He really would. Caleb watched his daughter work, her mind already building the future they'd barely begun to plan. This was what he'd wanted. Arya engaged, purposeful, creating instead of just coping. Hey, sweetheart. He waited until she paused her drawing. Are you okay with all these changes, with all these people helping us? Arya considered the question seriously. Change is difficult. New people are unpredictable. But Harper explained that sometimes change is good, and these people are helping, not hurting. So yes, I'm okay. Even if it means more people coming here? Guests at the lodge, construction workers, activity? Will there be quiet spaces? Absolutely. We'll make sure of it. And can I keep my room? Forever. Then, yes, I'm okay. She went back to her drawing. Besides, if we have an observatory, I can share astronomy with people. That would be good. Caleb felt tears threatening again. Yeah, baby, that would be very good. That night, after Arya was asleep and the planning had finally wound down, Caleb stood on the back deck with Valentina, looking at stars emerging through thinning clouds. Thank you, he said simply, for all of this. Thank you for letting us help, for trusting us. Valentina was quiet for a moment. Can I tell you something? Of course. When I escaped my ex, when I started over with nothing, I promised myself two things. One, I'd never be financially dependent on anyone again. Two, if I ever made it, I'd use my success to help women in similar situations. You've obviously kept both promises. I have. But somewhere along the way, I realized I'd defined helping too narrowly. I was only looking at women, only looking at domestic violence survivors. I was missing all the other kinds of breaking. She turned to face him. You're a veteran with PTSD raising a special needs daughter while fighting financial collapse. You're not the demographic I usually focus on. But suffering is suffering, struggling is struggling, and the need for community transcends gender or circumstance. So I'm an expansion of your mission? No. You're a reminder that the mission was always bigger than I originally understood. She smiled. That motorcycle club started as 20 women riding for fallen sisters, but it became something more. A chosen family, a support network, a way of moving through the world that prioritizes helping over judging. Is that what this retreat center could be, a chosen family for veterans? Maybe, if we build it right. If we create space for healing that doesn't require people to be anything other than themselves. Valentina looked back at the stars. Arya doesn't have to pretend to be neurotypical here. You don't have to hide your PTSD or your knee injury or your struggles. Imagine extending that same acceptance to everyone who comes through those doors. The vision crystallized in Caleb's mind, a place where broken didn't mean worthless, where different meant valuable, where people could heal at their own pace without judgment or expectation. We could do that, he said slowly. We really could. We will do that, starting tomorrow. Tomorrow. The word felt heavy with possibility. The roads opened the next morning exactly as predicted. The women packed their gear with practiced efficiency, checking motorcycles and mapping routes while Caleb tried to figure out how to say goodbye to people who'd become essential in 72 hours. Arya stood on the front steps with Harper, holding a carefully folded piece of paper. This is a star chart, she explained, handing it to Harper. I made it for you. It shows the major constellations visible from here in summer, so when you come back, we can look at them together. Harper's eyes glistened. When I come back? Partners come back, Arya said matter-of-factly. We're partners now. We're in the observatory project. We absolutely are. Harper carefully folded the star chart and tucked it into her jacket. I'll study this. And when I come back, you can quiz me. I will. I'm very good at quizzes. I don't doubt that for a second. One by one, the women hugged Caleb goodbye. Real hugs. Warm and genuine. They promised to stay in touch, to return for the groundbreaking, to be there when the retreat center opened. Rebecca handed him a folder thick with legal documents and instructions. Sandra gave him a flash drive full of resources for Arya. The colonel shook his hand and told him not to be stupid. Finally, only Valentina remained. "We'll talk next week," she said. "Get the architects scheduled, start interviewing contractors. Things are going to move fast." "I'm ready." "I know you are." She paused. "Caleb, I need you to understand something. This isn't me swooping in to save you. This is you choosing to save yourself. We're just providing tools and support. The work, the real, hard, daily work, that's on you." "I understand." "Good." She pulled him into a brief, fierce hug. "Don't make me regret believing in you." "I won't." He stood with Arya on the front steps, watching 22 motorcycles form up and roll out, engines roaring in synchronized farewell. The sound echoed off the mountains, powerful and alive. When the last bike disappeared around the bend and silence returned, Arya tugged his sleeve. "Daddy, everything is different now." "Yeah, baby, it is." "Is different good or bad?" Caleb looked at his lodge, repaired, alive, full of possibility for the first time in years. He thought about the plans they'd made, the team he'd gained, the future that had seemed impossible 3 days ago. "Different is good," he said firmly. "Different is very, very good." The silence after the motorcycles left felt heavier than Caleb expected. He and Arya stood on the front steps for a long moment, watching the empty road where dust still hung in the cold air like a ghost of departure. "They'll come back," Arya said quietly, as if reading his thoughts. "Harper promised. She doesn't seem like someone who breaks promises." "No, she doesn't." Caleb put his hand on his daughter's shoulder, feeling her stiffen slightly before relaxing into the touch. Small victories. "Come on, let's get inside. We've got work to do." The lodge felt different now, bigger somehow, despite being the same structure it had been a week ago. The repairs the women had made were visible everywhere Caleb looked. New railings, fixed pipes, rewired electrical panels. But more than that, the building felt alive again, like it remembered what it was supposed to be. His phone buzzed before they'd even made it back inside. A text from Valentina with 3 attachments and a simple message. "Architect contacts. All vetted, all excellent. Pick one by Friday." Caleb opened the first file and felt his stomach drop. The credentials were impressive: commercial developments, resort properties, accessibility-focused designs. The kind of professional he'd never imagined being able to afford. A second text arrived. "Don't look at their usual rates. This is negotiated. Trust me." He wanted to text back to ask 1,000 questions about how this was possible, about what negotiated meant, about whether he was drowning in debt before they'd even started. But Arya was pulling on his sleeve, showing him calculations she'd made for the observatory's optimal placement based on elevation and light pollution patterns. "The southeast corner of the property," she explained, pointing to a hand-drawn map. "Minimal tree cover, maximum sky visibility, protected from prevailing winds by that ridge." "It's perfect, Daddy. We could see everything from there." Caleb studied her careful notations, the precise angles and measurements. "How did you figure all this out?" "I researched. There are 17 academic papers on observatory placement in mountainous terrain. I read them all." She said it like it was nothing, like an 8-year-old consuming graduate-level research was just another Tuesday. "Of course you did." He pulled her close, pressing a kiss to the top of her head. "You're amazing, you know that?" "I'm thorough," Arya corrected. "Amazing is subjective. Thorough is measurable." The next 3 days blurred together in a cascade of phone calls and planning sessions. Caleb spoke with all 3 architects, each conversation revealing new possibilities he'd never considered. The second one, a woman named Patricia Chen, who'd designed veteran housing complexes in California, understood immediately what he was trying to build. "You're not just creating a retreat center," Patricia said during their video call. "You're creating a sanctuary, a place where the things that make people different are treated as strengths, not deficits." Exactly. Caleb felt something release in his chest. Finally, someone who got it. "I've worked with a lot of veteran-focused facilities. Most of them are institutional, clinical. Healing is a medical process rather than a human one." Patricia's face on the screen was animated, engaged. "But what you're describing, sensory-friendly spaces, family accommodations, programs built around individual needs. That's revolutionary. Or expensive and impossible. Expensive, yes. Impossible, no. She pulled up a digital sketchpad. Valentina sent me the property survey and photos. I've been thinking about this since yesterday. Want to see what I'm imagining? For the next 2 hours, Patricia walked him through preliminary concepts that made Caleb's heart race. Renovated lodge rooms with adjustable lighting and sound dampening, communal spaces designed for both gathering and isolation, therapy gardens with tactile pathways. And there, on the southeast corner, exactly where Arya had calculated, a small observatory with a retractable roof and wheelchair-accessible entrance. The budget Valentina outlined is aggressive but doable, Patricia said. We'd need to phase the construction, lodge renovation first, then the additional buildings. But we could have the main facility operational within 8 months. 8 months. Caleb tried to imagine it. That's fast. That's necessary. Every month the lodge sits empty is lost revenue and mounting costs. We move fast. We move smart. We get you open and generating income. Patricia's expression turned serious. But I need you to understand, this timeline only works if you're all in. No second guessing, no delays. You'd essentially be living in a construction zone while running a business. With a young daughter, it won't be easy. Caleb glanced at Arya, who was building an elaborate structure out of toothpicks at the kitchen table, completely absorbed. Easy isn't really our style anyway. Good. Then I'm your architect. Send me the contract and let's get started. After the call ended, Caleb sat in stunned silence. This was happening. Actually happening. The terror and exhilaration of it sat in his chest like competing storms. His phone rang. Rebecca this time. Good news and complicated news, she said without preamble. Which do you want first? Good news. I could use some. The bank agreed to a 6-month forbearance while we restructure the debt. Turns out they really don't want a federal review of their lending practices, and I made it very clear that's where this was heading if they pushed the foreclosure. Caleb felt dizzy with relief. 6 months. That's enough time. That's enough time if everything goes perfectly. Which brings me to the complicated news. Rebecca's tone shifted. The investment group Valentina is forming, it's substantial. We're talking about a $2 million initial capital infusion. $2 million? The number didn't seem real. Lodge renovation, new construction, operating capital, contingency funds. It adds up fast. But here's the thing, that money comes with structure. You'll have a board of directors, quarterly financial reviews, performance benchmarks you'll need to hit. I thought Valentina said I'd maintain operational control. You will. Day-to-day decisions are yours, but the investors get oversight. They get to ensure their money is being used wisely, and if things go south, they have protections built in. Rebecca paused. This is a real business partnership, Caleb, not a handshake deal. Everything will be formalized, legally binding. What happens if I fail? If the retreat center doesn't work? Worst case, the investors take ownership and you become an employee, or they sell the property and recoup what they can, but it won't come to that if you do the work. If you did the work, everything came back to that. Send me the paperwork, Caleb said. I'll review it. Already in your email. I'd recommend having another lawyer look it over, but I built in protections for you. You're not going to get screwed here, I promise. After they hung up, Caleb opened his laptop and started reading. The legal language was dense, intimidating, but Rebecca had included plain English explanations in the margins. The terms were fair, more than fair, honestly. Valentina and her co-investors were taking on substantial risk for relatively modest returns. This wasn't a predatory deal. This was people believing in him. The weight of that belief felt crushing and liberating in equal measure. That night, Caleb made dinner, spaghetti with marinara, Arya's favorite because the sauce-to-pasta ratio could be precisely controlled. They ate in comfortable silence, Arya counting noodles while Caleb's mind spun through construction timelines and business plans. Daddy? Arya set down her fork. Are you scared? The question caught him off guard. What makes you ask that? You have the same expression you had when the bank letter came. Tight around the eyes, shallow breathing, elevated stress indicators. Caleb had to smile despite himself. You've been studying anxiety responses? I've been studying you. You're my primary data set for human emotional patterns. She tilted her head. So are you scared? He could lie, could tell her everything was fine, that adults had it all figured out. But Arya valued honesty above comfort, and he'd learned that treating her like she couldn't handle complex truths only insulted her intelligence. Yeah, sweetheart, I'm scared. This is a huge risk. A lot of people are investing money and time in us, and if I mess this up, I let everyone down. Statistically, what's the probability of success? I don't know, maybe 50-50? Arya considered this. Those aren't terrible odds. A coin flip is 50-50, and coin flips aren't affected by effort or skill. But you have both of those things, so your actual probability is probably higher. That's a very logical way to look at it. Logic is usually helpful. She twirled another perfectly portioned forkful of spaghetti. Harper told me something before she left. She said courage isn't the absence of fear. It's feeling scared and choosing to try anyway. Harper's smart. She is, and so are you, so I think we'll be okay. Arya looked directly at him then, one of those rare moments of full eye contact. We're a good team, Daddy. You and me. We can do hard things. Caleb's throat tightened. Yeah, baby. We can. The following week brought the first wave of real work. Patricia arrived with a surveying team, taking measurements and soil samples and talking about load-bearing walls and foundation integrity. Arya followed them around with a notebook, recording data and asking questions that made the engineers laugh with delight. Your daughter should consider structural engineering when she grows up, one of them told Caleb. She's got the mind for it. She's got the mind for anything she wants, Caleb replied, watching Arya calculate the lodge's square footage in her head faster than the surveyor could punch it into his device. Valentina called every other day with updates. The investment group was formalizing. She'd found a business consultant who specialized in retreat centers and therapeutic hospitality. There was interest from veteran organizations who wanted to partner on programming. This is bigger than I initially imagined, Valentina admitted during one call. The potential reach is significant. We could help hundreds of families a year if we scale this right. Don't get ahead of yourself, Caleb cautioned. We haven't even broken ground yet. I know, but I can see it, Caleb. I can see what this becomes. Can you? He could. Late at night, when the lodge was quiet and Arya was asleep, Caleb would walk through the empty rooms and see them filled. Veterans finding peace in the mountains, families with special needs kids discovering community, people learning that broken doesn't mean finished, but vision and execution were different beasts entirely. The first major setback came 3 weeks into planning. Patricia called with bad news about the lodge's foundation. The northeast corner is compromised, she explained. Water damage over years has weakened the structural supports. We can repair it, but it adds another $100,000 to the budget and 6 weeks to the timeline. Caleb felt his stomach drop. $100,000? I'm sorry. I know that's significant, but if we don't address it now, you'll have major problems down the line. Potentially catastrophic failure. Let me talk to Valentina. Already did. She's approved the additional funds. Says to consider it part of the initial capital raise. Patricia paused. She really believes in this, Caleb. In you. After the call, Caleb sat on the front steps in the cold trying to process. $100,000, just like that. Money he could never have accessed on his own, now flowing into his project because Valentina had decided he was worth the investment. The responsibility felt enormous. You're doing the thinking thing again. Arya emerged from the house wearing her winter coat and carrying 2 mugs of hot chocolate. She handed him one and sat beside him. The thinking thing? Where you stare at nothing and your brain spirals through worst-case scenarios. I recognized the pattern. She sipped her chocolate carefully. What's wrong? Foundation problems, extra money needed, more delays. But Valentina approved the funds? Yeah. Then why are you worried? Because it's her money, Arya, money she worked hard for, and I'm spending it on a building that might not even succeed as a business. Arya was quiet for a moment, processing. In astronomy, there's a concept called gravitational lensing, when massive objects bend light from distant sources, allowing us to see things we couldn't otherwise observe. I'm not following, sweetheart. Valentina's investment is like gravitational lensing. She's bending resources toward you so you can see possibilities that were always there but previously invisible. The potential existed. She's just making it observable. Caleb stared at his daughter, this brilliant, strange, wonderful child who saw the world through frameworks most adults would never comprehend. "How did you get so wise?" he asked. "I read a lot. Also, pattern recognition is a strength for autistic people. I'm good at seeing connections." She leaned against his shoulder, tolerating the contact. "We're going to be okay, Daddy. The data supports it." He wrapped his arm around her, pulling her close. "I love you. You know that?" "I know. You tell me every day at 7:47 p.m. It's very consistent." Despite everything, Caleb laughed. Construction began the first week of May. Trucks rolled up the mountain road carrying lumber and materials and workers who eyed the lodge with professional assessment. Patricia had hired a contractor named Marcus who'd done 3 similar projects and understood the unique challenges of mountain construction. "We're going to make this place shine," Marcus promised, shaking Caleb's hand with a grip that suggested he meant business. "But you got to be ready for chaos. Construction is loud, messy, disruptive. Especially with your daughter's sensory needs, it's going to be tough." "We'll manage." "I'm sure you will, but let's make it easier. What are her biggest triggers?" Caleb blinked, surprised by the question. "Sudden loud noises, unpredictable sounds. Power tools are usually okay if she knows they're coming, but surprise impacts, hammering, dropping materials, those overwhelm her fast." "Okay, so we establish a sound schedule. Post daily what equipment we're using, approximate noise times, give her warning." Marcus pulled out his phone and started typing. "We can also create a quiet zone in the lodge, somewhere the sound doesn't penetrate. She can retreat there when it gets too much." "You don't have to do that." "Yeah, I do. My sister's kid has severe anxiety and sound sensitivity. I've seen what unmanaged environmental stress does to kids. We're already tearing apart your home. Least I can do is make it bearable." Marcus looked at him seriously. "This project only works if everyone involved gives a damn about the people it serves. That starts now, with your family." Caleb felt the now familiar tightness in his throat. Every person Valentina brought into this seemed to understand something fundamental about human dignity and care. "Thank you," he managed. "Don't thank me yet. Wait until we actually get this done on time and under budget." Marcus grinned. "Then you can thank me with a free weekend once this place is operational." The first day of demolition, Arya wore noise-canceling headphones and watched from the designated quiet zone, the back office that Marcus's crew had soundproofed overnight. She tracked the work in her notebook, documenting the sequence of destruction and reconstruction with scientific precision. "They're removing the damaged section of foundation first," she reported to Caleb during lunch break. "Then they'll pour new concrete, which takes 72 hours to cure properly. During that time, they'll work on the interior lodge renovations. It's very efficient sequencing." "You've been paying attention." Marcus explained the whole timeline. "He's very organized. I appreciate organized people." Over the following weeks, the lodge transformed. Walls came down, revealing spaces Caleb had forgotten existed. New framing went up, creating rooms designed for purpose rather than just occupancy. Patricia's vision became 3-dimensional reality as skilled workers brought her plans to life. Caleb worked alongside them when he could, learning as he went. His knees still protested the physical labor, but he paced himself, took breaks, used the pain as a barometer rather than a barrier. The Marines had taught him to work through discomfort. This was no different, except it was different, because he wasn't alone. Harper returned in early June, keeping her promise to Arya. She arrived on her Triumph with a backpack full of astronomy books and a genuine telescope she'd purchased specifically for their observatory project. "It's not professional grade," Harper admitted, setting up the scope in the clearing where the observatory would eventually stand. "But it's good enough to see Jupiter's moons and Saturn's rings. I thought Arya might enjoy it until we can get the real equipment." Arya stared at the telescope like it was the most precious thing she'd ever seen. "The aperture is 130 millimeters. That's actually quite good for amateur observation." "Yeah? I was worried it wouldn't be fancy enough." "Fancy is irrelevant. Optical quality is what matters, and this is excellent quality." Arya touched the telescope with reverent care. "Can we look at stars tonight?" "That's exactly what we're going to do." That evening, Caleb watched from the lodge as Arya and Harper set up the telescope, adjusting angles and checking alignment. Arya's animated explanations drifted across the distance, orbital mechanics in light years and stellar classification. Harper listened with complete attention, asking questions that made Arya elaborate and expand. Valentina had mentioned during one of their calls that Harper ran a nonprofit for at-risk youth. She worked with teenage girls who'd been through trauma, teaching them motorcycle maintenance and self-reliance. Watching her with Arya, Caleb understood why she was good at that work. Harper had the rare gift of making people feel heard without judgment. "They're good together." Marcus appeared beside him, wiping grease from his hands. "Your kid's lucky to have people who get her." "Yeah, she is." "You're doing good work here, not just the construction, the whole concept, creating space for people who don't fit standard molds." Marcus gestured toward the partially rebuilt lodge. "My brother-in-law came back from Iraq with severe PTSD. Couldn't handle crowds, noise, unpredictability. He tried the VA programs, but everything was designed for group processing, exposure therapy, pushing through discomfort. It broke him worse." "What happened to him?" "He found a small veterans group in Montana. Fly fishing and silence, and people who didn't expect him to be anything other than messed up. It saved his life." Marcus looked at Caleb directly. "You're building that here, a place where people can heal without performing recovery. That matters more than you probably realize." Caleb absorbed this, feeling the weight of responsibility and purpose intertwine. No pressure, right? Tons of pressure, but the good kind. The kind that makes you rise instead of sink. Later that night, after Harper and Arya had mapped 15 different celestial objects and Arya had finally gone to bed exhausted and happy, Caleb found Harper sitting on the front steps. "Thank you," he said, settling beside her, "for keeping your promise, for showing up." "I wanted to. Arya's special, not because of the autism, though that's part of who she is, but because she's unfiltered brilliance. She doesn't know how to be anything other than exactly herself." Harper smiled into the darkness. "That's rare. Most people spend their whole lives building masks. She never learned to fake it. Sometimes I worry that'll hurt her. The world isn't kind to people who can't fake normal." "Maybe, but maybe people like Arya change what normal means. Maybe watching someone be unapologetically themselves gives other people permission to do the same." Caleb thought about that, about Arya as a teacher rather than someone who needed to be taught, about authenticity as strength rather than liability. "How's your nonprofit going?" he asked. "Good. Hard, but good. We've got 17 girls in the current cohort, teaching them to rebuild motorcycles, fix engines, trust themselves. A lot of them come from situations where adults have failed them repeatedly. They don't believe in help." "How do you break through that?" "Consistency. Showing up. Proving that not everyone leaves." Harper was quiet for a moment. "It's what Valentina did for me, actually. When I was 23 and absolutely self-destructing, she hired me at her company despite zero qualifications, gave me a chance when I hadn't given myself one." "I didn't know that." "She doesn't broadcast it. But yeah, Valentina saves people. It's compulsive for her, which is why she's so good at spotting others worth saving." "I'm not sure I qualify as worth saving." "Caleb," Harper turned to face him. "You're a single dad raising a special needs daughter while running a business and dealing with your own trauma. You opened your door to strangers in a blizzard when you had every reason to protect yourself. You're choosing to fight for something bigger than your own survival." She shook her head. "If you're not worth saving, none of us are." The words settled into him, filling spaces he hadn't realized were empty. "Stay in touch?" he asked. "Arya's going to want updates on your motorcycle adventures." "Absolutely. And I'm coming back for the opening. Wild horses couldn't keep me away." After Harper left the next morning, Arya was quieter than usual. Caleb found her in her room, holding the star chart she'd given Harper that first time. The one Harper had returned with annotations and questions written in the margins. "You miss her," Caleb observed. "Missing people is inefficient. She'll return eventually." But Arya's voice was smaller than usual. "It's okay to miss people, sweetheart. It means they matter to you." "Mattering to people is complicated." "Yeah, but it's also good." Arya set down the star chart carefully. Harper said I could email her to talk about astronomy and other things. Is that okay? Of course it's okay. Good, because I have 17 questions about her nonprofit and the physics of motorcycle suspension systems. Caleb laughed. Of course you do. The summer accelerated into a blur of construction and planning. The lodge's interior renovation finished ahead of schedule, revealing spaces that felt both familiar and completely new. Patricia had designed each room with flexibility, furniture that could be rearranged, lighting that could be adjusted, soundproofing that could be enhanced, spaces that adapted to people rather than forcing people to adapt to spaces. The first corporate group from Valentina's company booked a weekend retreat in late July, even though construction was still ongoing. 12 executives looking for team-building activities and mountain air. Caleb prepared obsessively, checking and rechecking every detail. You're spiraling, Valentina said during a video call the night before the group arrived. Take a breath. You've got this. What if I don't? What if they hate it, leave bad reviews, tank this before it even starts? Then we learn and adjust. But they won't hate it. You're offering something unique, authenticity, connection, genuine hospitality. That's rare in corporate retreats. The group arrived Saturday morning, and Caleb's anxiety spiked immediately. These were polished professionals, people who probably stayed at five-star resorts and expected perfection. But then one of them, a woman in her 50s with silver hair, looked around the great room and said, "Oh, this is real. This is actually real." Real? Caleb repeated. Not corporate, not manufactured, not some resort pretending to be rustic while offering turn-down service and spa treatments. She smiled. This is a family home that's opening its doors. You can feel the difference. The weekend exceeded every expectation. The executives hiked, played cards by the fire, had actual conversations instead of performing networking. Two of them were veterans and spent hours with Caleb, sharing stories in silence in equal measure. One woman had a son with autism and teared up when she saw the sensory-friendly accommodations Caleb had built into every space. "Can I bring him here?" she asked. "As a family retreat?" "That's exactly what this is for," Caleb said. Sunday afternoon, as the group was packing to leave, the silver-haired woman approached Caleb with a business card. "I run a foundation that supports veteran initiatives," she explained. "We provide grants for programs that demonstrate innovation and impact. I'd like to nominate this retreat center once you're fully operational. Could be substantial funding." Caleb stared at the card. "You'd do that?" "I'd be honored to. What you're building here, it's what we need more of in this country. Places that treat healing as a human process rather than a transaction." She shook his hand firmly. "Keep doing what you're doing, Mr. Mercer. The world needs more of it." After they left, Caleb called Valentina immediately. "It worked," he said without preamble. "The retreat worked. They loved it. One of them wants to nominate us for a grant." "See? I told you." Valentina's voice was warm with satisfaction. "You're a natural at this. I was terrified the entire time." Best ideas are usually terrifying. That's how you know they matter. That evening, Caleb sat with Arya on the back deck, watching the construction site slowly transform into an observatory. The foundation was poured. The walls were framing out. Another month, and it would be finished. "We're really doing this," he said quietly. "Of course we are," Arya replied, tracking satellites with her binoculars. "You committed to the project. Commitment means follow through. We always follow through." "When did you get so sure of everything?" "I'm not sure of everything. I'm sure of you." She lowered the binoculars and looked at him with those serious dark eyes. "You told me once that Marines don't quit, so I know you won't quit this." Caleb pulled her close, feeling the weight of her trust settle around his shoulders like a mantle. "You're right," he said. "We don't quit. Not now. Not ever." Above them, stars emerged one by one, ancient light traveling impossible distances to reach this moment. Somewhere in that vastness, all 88 constellations waited to be seen by a little girl who understood that patterns existed even in chaos. And down here, on a mountain in Colorado, a man who'd been broken learned that broken was just another word for becoming something new. The grant application arrived in August, 37 pages of questions that made Caleb's head spin. He sat at the kitchen table surrounded by financial projections and mission statements and impact assessments, trying to translate his vision into bureaucratic language that would convince strangers to invest in something that didn't fully exist yet. "You're using too many words." Arya appeared at his elbow, reading over his shoulder. "This paragraph says the same thing 3 different ways. Pick one." "It's a grant application, sweetheart. They expect formal language." "Formal doesn't mean redundant. You're obscuring your actual meaning with unnecessary elaboration." She pointed to a section he'd spent 2 hours writing. "This could be 2 sentences. You help veterans heal in a non-clinical environment. You provide family-friendly accommodations that serve diverse neurological needs. Done." Caleb read her simplified version. It was clearer, stronger, more direct than his bloated paragraphs. "When did you become an editor?" "I've always been precise with language. You just haven't asked for my help before." Arya pulled out a chair and sat beside him. "What are you trying to say here?" For the next 3 hours, they worked together. Caleb explaining the vision, Arya distilling it to essential elements. She asked questions that forced him to clarify his thinking, challenged assumptions he hadn't examined, caught inconsistencies in his logic. By the time they finished, the application was half its original length and twice as effective. "You're kind of brilliant at this," Caleb said, saving the final version. "I'm good at pattern recognition and systematic thinking. Grant applications are just systems." Arya closed his laptop. "Also, you should eat something. You've been working for 6 hours and I can hear your stomach making distress sounds." They made sandwiches together, falling into the comfortable rhythm they'd developed over years of being a team of 2. Caleb cut the bread at precise angles the way Arya preferred. Arya arranged the ingredients in symmetrical layers, small accommodations that had become second nature. "Harper emailed," Arya said through a bite of sandwich. "She's bringing 3 of her girls from the nonprofit when she comes for the observatory opening. She wants them to see what we're building." "That's great. When's she planning to come?" "October 15th. The observatory should be finished by then. Marcus confirmed the timeline yesterday." Arya pulled out her phone and showed him the construction schedule she'd been tracking. "They're 17 days ahead of projections. Very efficient. Marcus runs a tight operation." "He does. Also, he told me I should consider project management as a career. He says my organizational skills are exceptional." She said it matter-of-factly, but Caleb caught the hint of pride in her voice. "He's right. You'd be incredible at that." "I'm considering it. But I'm also considering astrophysics, aerospace engineering, and data science. I have time to decide." Caleb smiled. Most 8-year-olds were thinking about their favorite cartoons, not career trajectories in STEM fields. But Arya had never been most kids. "You've got all the time in the world, sweetheart." The next morning brought unexpected news. Rebecca called with an update on the foreclosure situation that made Caleb's hands shake. "The bank wants to settle," she said. "They're willing to restructure the entire loan, reduce the principal by $40,000, and extend the term. Essentially, they're acknowledging they screwed up and want this to go away quietly." "$40,000? Just gone?" "Just gone. Plus the new payment terms are manageable even without the retreat income. You'll actually have breathing room." Rebecca's satisfaction was audible through the phone. "They really don't want me filing that federal complaint. Their lending practices have been questionable for years, and they know a deep audit would expose problems across their entire portfolio. So I win?" "You win. Sign the settlement agreement and you're free of the foreclosure threat permanently. The lodge is yours, clear and simple." After the call ended, Caleb sat in stunned silence. The threat that had dominated his life for months was just over. The weight he'd carried so long he'd forgotten what lightness felt like suddenly lifted. He found Arya in the observatory construction site wearing a hard hat Marcus had given her and taking measurements with a laser device. "The bank settled," Caleb said. "We get to keep the lodge. No more foreclosure threat." Arya lowered the laser measure and looked at him. "That's good news." "That's incredible news." "Yes, but it was always the probable outcome once Rebecca got involved. She's very competent." Arya went back to her measurements. "The ceiling height here is perfect. We'll have an unobstructed view of approximately 72% of the visible sky hemisphere." Caleb laughed because what else could he do? His daughter had just dismissed the resolution of their biggest crisis as statistically predictable and moved on to telescope sightlines. It was so perfectly Arya that his heart ached with love. You want to celebrate? He asked. Ice cream in town? Your choice of flavor? Can we get mint chocolate chip and come back to watch the construction crew install the roof mechanism? They're doing it this afternoon, and I want to document the process. Absolutely, we can. They drove down the mountain to the small town of Blackridge, population 3,847, where everyone knew everyone, and the arrival of construction crews at the old Mercer Lodge had been the subject of considerable gossip. The ice cream shop was run by a woman named Doris, who'd known Caleb's father and had strong opinions about everything. Heard you're turning the place into some kind of veteran resort, Doris said, scooping Arya's mint chocolate chip with practiced efficiency. That true? Retreat center, Caleb corrected. For veterans and families. Therapeutic programs, accessible facilities, that kind of thing. Your daddy would have liked that. He always said that Lodge was meant to help people find peace. Doris handed Arya her cone. You doing okay up there, sweetheart? All that construction noise must be hard on you. I have noise-canceling headphones and a designated quiet space, Arya replied. Also, Marcus posts a daily sound schedule so I know when loud equipment will be operating. It's very considerate. Marcus is the contractor? The one from Denver? Yes. He's completed 3 similar projects with a 94% on-time delivery rate. Doris looked at Caleb. She always talked like a textbook? Pretty much. You get used to it. I imagine you do. Doris rang up their order. Listen, I'm glad you're saving the place. This town needs young families staying. Too many people move away, leave us with nothing but retirees and tourists. You're doing good work. The casual approval from a woman who rarely approved of anything made Caleb's chest tight. He'd grown up in this town, left for the Marines, come back broken. Being welcomed home felt like a gift he hadn't known he needed. They ate their ice cream sitting on the curb outside the shop, watching the minimal traffic pass by. A few people waved. Mrs. Henderson from the library stopped to ask Arya about her latest astronomy discoveries. Tom from the hardware store mentioned he'd heard the lodge was hiring and his nephew might be interested in maintenance work. Community. The word kept echoing in Caleb's mind. He'd been so focused on survival, on keeping his head above water, that he'd forgotten what it felt like to be part of something larger than his own struggle. Daddy? Arya's voice pulled him from his thoughts. There's a girl watching us from the bookstore. Caleb followed her gaze and saw a teenage girl, maybe 15, peering through the window of the used bookstore. She had dark hair, multiple piercings, and an expression that suggested she wanted to approach but couldn't quite commit. You know her? Caleb asked. No, but she looks uncertain. Should we help? Before Caleb could answer, Arya stood and walked directly to the bookstore. She knocked on the window, startling the girl inside, then gestured for her to come out. The girl emerged slowly, defensive posture screaming, "Don't hurt me." Hello? Arya said with her characteristic directness. I'm Arya. You were staring at us. Do you need assistance? The girl blinked. No. Sorry, I was just... Observing? That's acceptable. I observe people frequently to learn social patterns. Are you from Blackridge? Yeah, well, kind of. I'm staying with my aunt for the summer, or maybe longer. It's complicated. The girl looked at Caleb, clearly trying to figure out their relationship. This is my father, Caleb. We live at the lodge on the mountain. He's building a retreat center for veterans and families with special needs children. Oh, that's cool? Arya tilted her head, studying the girl with unsettling intensity. You have a NASA shirt. Do you like space? Yeah, I used to. I haven't really thought about it much lately. The girl's eyes were guarded, carrying weight no teenager should carry. I'm an astronomy expert. I know all 88 constellations and can calculate orbital mechanics for most celestial bodies in our solar system. If you're interested in space, we could talk about it sometime. Arya, Caleb said gently, maybe give her some space to decide if she wants to. I'd like that, the girl interrupted. Talking about space, if that's okay. Arya's face brightened. It's very okay. We're going back to watch construction crews install an observatory roof. You could come if you want. It's interesting from an engineering perspective. The girl looked at Caleb, uncertainty and hope warring in her expression. He saw something familiar there, The desperate need to be somewhere safe, to have something normal, to escape whatever circumstances had brought her to a small mountain town to live with relatives. "You're welcome to come," Caleb said, "if your aunt is okay with it." "She won't care. She's pretty much drunk by noon most days." The words were bitter, practiced. "I'm Zoe, by the way." "Nice to meet you, Zoe. You like ice cream?" "Sure." "Then let's get you some and head back up the mountain." The drive back was quiet. Zoe sat in the back seat, staring out the window while Arya explained the technical specifications of the observatory's retractable roof mechanism. Caleb watched Zoe in the rearview mirror, seeing the gradual relaxation of her shoulders, the way her defensive posture softened incrementally. He knew that body language. He'd seen it in Marines fresh from combat zones. The constant vigilance, the inability to truly relax, the assumption that safety was temporary at best. What had happened to this kid? At the lodge, Marcus's crew was indeed installing the roof mechanism, a complex system of motors and tracks that would allow the roof to slide open for telescope viewing. Arya immediately launched into an explanation of the astronomical requirements that had dictated the design. Zoe listened, asking occasional questions that revealed a sharp mind underneath the defensive exterior. She helped Arya take measurements, held the laser level when asked, and gradually began to smile. "This is really cool," Zoe said as the roof slid open for the first test run, revealing blue sky above. "Like, actually cool. Not adult trying to be relevant cool." "Thank you," Arya said seriously. "I designed the placement and sightline specifications. Marcus's team executed the engineering." "You designed this? But you're like 10. "I'm 8. Age is irrelevant to competency. I have expertise in astronomy. Therefore, I designed the observatory." Arya said it with such confidence that Zoe just nodded. "Fair enough." They spent the afternoon at the construction site. Zoe asked questions about the retreat center, about Arya's astronomy knowledge, about the lodge's history. She was careful, testing boundaries, but clearly starved for connection. When the sun started setting, Caleb offered to drive her back to town. "Could I stay for dinner?" Zoe asked quietly. "I mean, if that's okay. I can call my aunt, but she probably won't even notice I'm gone." Caleb saw Arya watching Zoe with that analytical stare that meant she was processing information and coming to conclusions. "Of course you can stay," Caleb said. "You like spaghetti?" "I like anything that's not frozen pizza. That's basically all my aunt buys." Dinner was chaotic in the best way. Zoe helped cook, revealing she actually knew her way around a kitchen. She and Arya bonded over precise measurements, Arya's for sensory preferences, Zoe's for recipe accuracy. The conversation flowed naturally, touching on everything from orbital mechanics to the best sauce-to-pasta ratio to whether Jupiter's Great Red Spot was technically a storm or a different meteorological phenomenon. After dinner, Arya brought out her star charts, and she and Zoe spread them across the dining table, comparing notes and debating stellar classifications. Caleb cleaned up in the kitchen, watching them work together. Two kids who probably didn't fit anywhere else, finding common ground in the language of stars. His phone buzzed. A text from Valentina. "How's the grant application going?" "Submitted yesterday. Fingers crossed." "You'll get it. I have faith in you." Caleb smiled at the screen, then typed back. "Random question. Your nonprofit network. Anyone work with at-risk teens?" "Several. Why?" "Met a kid today, 15, staying with an alcoholic aunt, clearly dealing with trauma. Smart, interested in space, desperately needs stability and support." "Give me details. I'll make some calls." He provided what he knew about Zoe, which wasn't much, but Valentina had proven she could work miracles with less. When he returned to the dining room, he found Arya teaching Zoe how to calculate the distance to Alpha Centauri using parallax measurements. Zoe was scribbling equations on notebook paper, her tongue caught between her teeth in concentration. "This is insane," Zoe said, but she was smiling. "Like, actually insane. We can measure how far away a star is just by looking at it from different positions?" That's how parallax works. It's the same principle as how your two eyes create depth perception, just on a cosmic scale. Arya pointed to her diagram. "Your turn. Calculate the parallax angle for Proxima Centauri." Zoe worked through the problem while Arya watched with the patience of a born teacher. When Zoe got the answer right, she actually laughed, a real, unguarded sound of delight. I did it! I actually did it! Of course you did. You're methodical and precise. Those are essential qualities for astronomical calculations. Arya began organizing her charts with careful precision. You should come back tomorrow. We're testing the telescope mount alignment. Zoe's expression shuddered slightly. I don't know. My aunt might need me to. Your aunt is incapacitated by alcohol most days, according to your earlier statement. Therefore, she doesn't require your assistance. Arya's bluntness made Caleb wince, but Zoe actually smiled. You just say whatever you're thinking, don't you? Yes, filtering is inefficient. Do you want to come back tomorrow or not? Yeah, I do. Caleb drove Zoe home after dark, following her directions to a rundown apartment complex on the edge of town. The building was tired, neglected, exactly the kind of place where people landed when they'd run out of better options. Thanks for dinner, Zoe said, unbuckling her seatbelt. And for letting me hang out. Arya's really cool. She thinks you're cool too, and you're welcome back any time. I mean that. Zoe's eyes went bright with unshed tears. Why are you being nice to me? You don't even know me. Don't need to know your whole story to see you're a good kid dealing with hard circumstances. And I've been where you are. Not exactly, but close enough. Sometimes the only thing that saves you is someone deciding to give a damn. Is that what happened to you? Caleb thought about 22 women on motorcycles, about Valentina's offer, about the community that had formed around his crisis. Yeah, he said. That's exactly what happened to me. Zoe wiped her eyes quickly. Well, thanks. I'll see you tomorrow, maybe. We'll be there. He watched her climb the exterior stairs to a second-floor apartment, saw her pause at the door before disappearing inside. Then he sat in his truck for a long moment, thinking about broken kids and second chances and the way healing seemed to multiply when you opened yourself to it. His phone buzzed. Valentina again. Called in some favors. There's a social worker in Black Ridge who specializes in teen placement. Her name is Maria Santos. I sent her Zoe's situation. She'll reach out tomorrow. You work fast. I work with purpose. There's a difference. That kid deserves better than a drunk aunt and frozen pizza. Thank you. Thank me by keeping your door open to her. Sometimes the best intervention is just showing people what stable looks like. The next morning, Zoe arrived at the lodge on a bicycle that looked older than she was. She was there when Caleb and Arya finished breakfast, leaning the bike against the porch railing with careful precision. Morning, Caleb called. You have breakfast? Had a granola bar. That's not breakfast. Come on, I'll make you eggs. While Caleb cooked, Arya showed Zoe the email correspondence she'd been having with Harper about nonprofit structures and motorcycle maintenance. Zoe read the emails with growing interest. This woman sounds amazing, Zoe said. She really teaches girls to fix bikes? Yes, it's a skills development and empowerment program for girls who've experienced trauma. Harper says mechanical skills provide concrete, measurable progress that builds self-efficacy. Arya recited it like she was reading from a textbook. Also, motorcycles are cool. Have you ever ridden one? No, but Harper promised to teach me when I'm old enough. She says 14 is appropriate for learning on smaller bikes. Zoe's expression went distant. I used to ride dirt bikes with my dad. Before... She didn't finish the sentence, didn't need to. Before what? Arya asked with her characteristic directness. Before he died. Drunk driver hit him while he was coming home from work. I was 12. Zoe's voice was flat, practiced. My mom couldn't handle it. Started using. Lost her job, lost our house. CPS took me, put me in foster care for 2 years. Then my aunt agreed to take me, so here I am. Caleb set a plate of eggs in front of her, his heart aching for this kid who'd been dealt the worst possible hand. I'm sorry, he said quietly. That's too much loss for anyone, let alone a kid. Yeah, well, it is what it is. Zoe picked up her fork. At least your place is better than my last foster home. Those people just wanted the check, didn't care about anything else. You deserve people who care, Caleb said. Maybe. Doesn't mean I get them. Arya was watching Zoe with that intense focus that meant she was processing something important. Finally, she spoke. My mother left when I was 6. She said I was too difficult, that raising me was exhausting, that she needed a life that wasn't consumed by my needs. Arya's voice was matter-of-fact, but Caleb heard the hurt underneath. I understand parental abandonment. It's statistically common, but individually devastating. Zoe stared at Arya. How do you deal with it? I have my father. He didn't abandon me. He chose me every day, even when it was hard. Arya looked at Caleb. That makes the difference. One person who stays. The moment hung between them, heavy with shared understanding. Then Zoe nodded slowly. Yeah, I guess it does. They spent the day testing the observatory equipment. The telescope mount alignment required precise calculations and adjustments. Zoe proved to have a natural aptitude for the mechanical aspects, while Arya handled the astronomical requirements. They worked together seamlessly, two pieces of a puzzle neither had known was incomplete. Around 3 in the afternoon, a woman in her 40s arrived at the lodge, introducing herself as Maria Santos. I'm a social worker with the county, she explained to Caleb. I got a call from a colleague about a teenager named Zoe who might benefit from some additional support. Caleb glanced at where Zoe and Arya were adjusting the telescope mount, heads bent together in concentration. She's here, he said quietly. But I don't know how she'll react to official intervention. She's been through the system before. I understand. Mind if I just observe for a bit? Sometimes it helps to see a kid in their element before approaching them directly. Maria watched Zoe work for nearly an hour, taking notes but staying unobtrusive. Finally, she approached the girls at the observatory. You must be Zoe, Maria said gently. I'm Maria. Mind if I ask what you're working on? Zoe's defenses went up immediately. I'm not doing anything wrong. I didn't think you were. I'm just genuinely curious about the telescope. Arya, oblivious to the tension, launched into an explanation of parallax measurement and stellar distance calculations. Zoe gradually relaxed as Maria asked intelligent questions and showed genuine interest. You're good at this, Maria observed. Both of you. Have you considered astronomy as a career path, Zoe? I haven't really considered any career paths. Kind of hard to plan for the future when the present is a mess. Fair point. But sometimes planning for the future is what makes the present bearable. Maria pulled out a business card. I work with teenagers in difficult situations. Help them access resources, navigate systems, find stability. If you ever want to talk about options, educational programs, better living situations, whatever, give me a call. Zoe took the card warily. My aunt has custody. I'm stuck there. Maybe. Or maybe there are alternatives worth exploring. No pressure, just know the option exists. Maria smiled at both girls. Thanks for the astronomy lesson. Learned more in the last hour than I did in my entire high school science class. After Maria left, Zoe was quiet for a long time. Finally, she looked at Caleb. Did you call her? A friend did. Someone who helps kids in situations like yours. I don't need help. Everyone needs help sometimes. That's not weakness. That's being human. Zoe's jaw clenched. I should go. Zoe, wait. But she was already on her bike, pedaling down the mountain road with furious intensity. Arya watched her go, then turned to Caleb. She's scared. Fear manifests as anger in approximately 63% of adolescent trauma responses. I know, sweetheart, but sometimes people need to be scared before they can be brave. That evening, Caleb got a text from an unknown number. This is Zoe. Sorry I freaked out. Can I still come back tomorrow? He replied immediately. Anytime. Door's always open. 3 dots appeared, disappeared, appeared again. Finally. Thanks. Caleb showed the text to Arya, who nodded with satisfaction. Good. We need her help calibrating the telescope tracking system. She's better at mechanical adjustments than I am. Is that the only reason you want her to come back? Arya considered this seriously. No, I also enjoy her company. She's smart and she listens when I explain things. Most people don't listen. They just wait for me to stop talking. Zoe's special. Zoe's traumatized and displaced and searching for stability in a chaotic environment. But yes, she's also special. Arya gathered her astronomy notebooks. We should help her, Daddy, the way people helped us. Caleb pulled his daughter close. marveling at her capacity for empathy despite struggling to read social cues, her ability to see clearly what others needed, even when she couldn't always articulate her own needs. Yeah, baby, we should, and we will. Outside, the first stars emerged as daylight faded. Somewhere in that vast darkness, constellations waited to be mapped by a girl who understood patterns and a teenager who needed to believe the future could be different than the past. And in a lodge on a mountain, a man who'd learned the hard way that help wasn't weakness began to understand that sometimes healing yourself meant helping others find their own way home. Zoe came back the next day, and the day after that, and the day after that. By the end of the week, she was arriving before breakfast and staying until after dinner. Maria Santos stopped by twice more, each time keeping her distance, letting Zoe see that help didn't have to mean intrusion. The third time Maria visited, Zoe actually approached her. "My aunt's getting worse," Zoe said without preamble. "She's drinking earlier in the day, stopped buying groceries. I'm pretty sure she's going to lose the apartment." "What do you want to happen?" Maria asked carefully. "I want to not go back into the system. I want to finish high school somewhere that isn't constantly falling apart. I want—" Zoe's voice cracked. "I want to feel safe." Maria pulled out a folder. "I've been looking into options. There's a program for teens aging out of unstable placements, transitional housing with educational support. It's in Denver, about 90 minutes from here. So I'd have to leave." "Not necessarily. The program allows for local guardian arrangements if there's someone willing and qualified." Maria looked past Zoe to where Caleb was helping Marcus's crew with final touches on the observatory. "Have you talked to Caleb about any of this?" "He's got enough to deal with. He doesn't need some random teenager as a project." "I don't think he sees you as a project. And from what I've observed, you've become pretty important to his daughter." As if summoned, Arya appeared with a clipboard and her characteristic intensity. "Zoe, we need to finalize the star party schedule. Harper confirmed she's bringing her girls on October 15th, and we need to coordinate the observation windows with optimal viewing conditions." "Star party?" Maria asked. "The observatory's grand opening," Arya explained. "We're inviting community members and potential retreat center clients to demonstrate our astronomical capabilities and educational programming." She said it like she was presenting a dissertation. "Zoe is co-coordinator." "I didn't agree to that title," Zoe protested, but she was smiling. "You're performing the function, therefore you hold the title. That's how organizational structures work." Arya turned to Maria. "Are you trying to take Zoe away? Because that would disrupt our project timeline significantly." Maria blinked at the directness. "I'm trying to help Zoe find a stable situation." "She has a stable situation. She's here." Arya looked at Zoe seriously. "You should stay. We have 17 empty rooms and you're useful. Also, I like you. Those two factors make cohabitation logical." Zoe's eyes went bright. "Arya, that's not how it works. I can't just move in because you like me." "Why not? Adults make decisions about living arrangements based on preference all the time. You prefer being here. We prefer having you here. The math is simple." "The math is actually pretty complicated," Maria said gently. "But Arya's not entirely wrong. Caleb, you have a minute?" Caleb joined them, wiping sawdust from his hands. Maria laid out the situation with professional efficiency. Zoe's deteriorating home situation, the transitional housing option, the possibility of local guardian arrangements. "I can't ask you to take on another kid," Maria concluded. "You're already managing Arya's needs while launching a business. But I wanted you to know the option exists if you were interested." Caleb looked at Zoe, at this fierce, brilliant teenager who'd carved out a place in their lives without even realizing it. He thought about the empty rooms in his lodge, about the retreat center's mission of providing sanctuary for people who needed it. "How would it work legally?" he asked. Zoe's head snapped up. "Wait, you're actually considering this? You're here every day anyway. You and Arya work well together. You're smart, responsible, and you need somewhere stable to land." Caleb shrugged. "Seems like a pretty straightforward decision to me. But I'm a mess. I've got trauma and trust issues, and I probably need therapy. Join the club. I've got PTSD and a bum knee and more baggage than anyone should carry." Caleb smiled. "We're all a little broken here. That's kind of the point." Maria pulled out more paperwork. There'd be a home study, background checks, regular social worker visits for the first 6 months. The county would provide financial support for her care, and Zoe would need to agree. This only works if it's what she wants. Everyone looked at Zoe. She stood frozen, tears streaming down her face. "I don't understand," she whispered. "You barely know me. Why would you do this?" "Because someone did it for me," Caleb said simply. 3 months ago, I was 30 days from losing everything. Strangers showed up and decided I was worth saving. This is me paying it forward. That's exactly what Valentina said would happen, Arya observed. The multiplication of help. You help someone, they help someone else. The pattern propagates exponentially. Zoe wiped her eyes with shaking hands. If I say yes, I won't be perfect. I'll probably screw up. I might be difficult. Good thing I'm used to difficult, Caleb said, winking at Arya. I heard that, Arya said. I'm not difficult. I'm specific. My mistake. Maria was already pulling out forms. If we start the process now, we could have Zoe placed here within 2 weeks. Temporary emergency placement while the full assessment happens. Do it, Caleb said. Zoe, Maria asked, this is your choice. Zoe looked at the lodge, at the observatory, at Arya standing there with her clipboard like this was all perfectly logical. She looked at Caleb, at this man who'd decided that opening his door to one more broken person was just what you did when you had the space. Yes, she said. Please, yes. Arya immediately started making notes on her clipboard. We'll need to prepare a room. Zoe requires more personal space than standard guest accommodations. I suggest the corner room on the second floor. Good natural light, private bathroom, sufficient distance from construction noise. I love how you've already got this planned, Zoe said, laughing through tears. Planning is essential for successful outcomes. Obviously, I planned for this. The next 2 weeks were controlled chaos. Maria expedited the paperwork with efficiency that suggested she'd been waiting for the right placement. Zoe's aunt signed over guardianship without argument, barely looked up from her bottle long enough to scrawl her signature. Child Protective Services did their assessment and found the lodge not just adequate, but exceptional for a teenager's needs. Zoe moved in on a Saturday in late September. Everything she owned fit in 3 garbage bags and 1 cardboard box. Caleb helped her carry it upstairs to the room Arya had designated, watching Zoe's face as she took in the space they'd prepared. Fresh paint, new furniture, a desk positioned to catch morning light. This is mine? Zoe asked quietly. All yours, for as long as you need it. She set down her bags and just stood there, looking around like she couldn't quite believe it was real. I've never had my own room before, she admitted. Foster homes were always shared spaces. My aunt's apartment had 1 bedroom and a couch. Well, now you do. Make it your own. That night, they had their first dinner as an expanded family. Arya insisted on making spaghetti because it was tradition, and Zoe helped with practiced efficiency. They ate together at the big dining table, and afterward Zoe helped Arya organize star charts for the upcoming observatory opening while Caleb reviewed retreat center bookings. It felt startlingly normal, like this was how it had always been. Later, after Arya was asleep and Zoe had retreated to her new room, Caleb called Valentina with an update. You took in a teenager? Valentina sounded delighted. That's ambitious. That's apparently what we do now. Open doors and see who needs to walk through them. I'm proud of you, truly. Valentina's voice was warm. How's everything else? The retreat center opening is in 3 weeks, right? 3 weeks exactly. We're 97% booked for the first month. Corporate retreats, veteran family weekends, 2 autism support group gatherings. It's terrifying and amazing. It's going to be incredible. I'm bringing the full investment group for the opening weekend. Everyone wants to see what we've built. After they hung up, Caleb walked through the lodge in the quiet darkness. The building felt alive in a way it hadn't since his father's time. Not just physically restored, but spiritually renewed, like it remembered its purpose. He found Zoe sitting on the back deck, staring at the stars. Can't sleep? He asked, settling into the chair beside her. Still getting used to it. The quiet, I mean. My aunt's apartment was always noisy. Traffic, neighbors fighting, her TV blasting. Zoe pulled her knees to her chest. This is different. Good different or bad different? Good. Definitely good. Just different. She was quiet for a moment. Can I ask you something? Sure. Why weren't you scared? When Maria suggested I move in, you didn't even hesitate. Most people would have run the other way. Caleb thought about how to answer honestly. I was scared, still am, a little. What if I mess this up? What if I'm not what you need? Those questions keep me up at night. Then why do it? Because being scared of doing the wrong thing is better than being scared you didn't do anything at all. He looked at her directly. You needed help. I could provide it. Everything else is just details. Arya said you're a Marine, that you got injured overseas. IED outside Kandahar. Shattered my knee, ended my career, left me with PTSD that still hits sometimes. Caleb stretched his bad leg. I came home broken and angry and lost. Took me years to figure out that broken doesn't mean finished. Is that what you think about me? That I'm broken? I think you're a survivor. There's a difference. Broken implies something that can't work anymore. Survivors are people who learn to work differently. He smiled. You're one of the strongest people I've met, Zoe. You just don't know it yet. She wiped her eyes quickly. I'm going to try really hard not to screw this up. You're going to screw it up sometimes. So am I. So will Arya. That's how families work. We mess up and figure it out and keep showing up anyway. Family, Zoe repeated softly. I haven't had one of those in a long time. Well, you've got one now. The observatory's grand opening arrived with perfect autumn weather, clear skies, minimal wind, temperatures just cool enough for comfortable outdoor observation. Harper showed up mid-morning with 3 teenage girls from her nonprofit, all carrying sleeping bags in excitement. This is incredible, Harper said, touring the completed facility. Caleb, you've built something really special here. The observatory sat on the southeast corner of the property, exactly as Arya had calculated. A small building with clean lines and a retractable roof that opened to reveal the sky. Inside, the telescope, a proper research-grade instrument funded by Valentina's investment group, stood ready for its first official use. Arya had prepared an entire presentation about stellar observation techniques. She'd made handouts, created visual aids, and practiced her explanations with Zoe's help. Now she stood before a small crowd of town residents, potential retreat clients, and Valentina's investment group, delivering her lecture with the confidence of someone who'd never questioned her own expertise. The advantage of high-altitude observation is reduced atmospheric interference, Arya explained, pointing to a diagram. At this elevation, we have approximately 18% less atmospheric distortion than sea-level observatories. One of Harper's girls raised her hand. How do you know all this? I read extensively. Also, I've calculated the optimal viewing windows for every major celestial event for the next 5 years. Arya said it like it was completely normal. Would you like to see the spreadsheet? She made a spreadsheet, Zoe Stage whispered to Harper. She makes spreadsheets for everything. I heard that, Arya said. And yes, organization is essential for scientific accuracy. The presentation dissolved into enthusiastic questions and hands-on telescope time. Arya and Zoe worked together seamlessly, helping visitors locate planets and galaxies, explaining magnitude scales and light pollution effects. The 3 girls from Harper's program were particularly engaged, asking sharp questions that revealed minds hungry for knowledge and purpose. Caleb stood back, watching it all unfold. Valentina appeared beside him, surveying the scene with satisfaction. This is better than I imagined, she said. You've created something transformative here. We created it. I couldn't have done any of this without you. Maybe, but you're the one who did the work. You're the one who believed it could happen even when it seemed impossible. Valentina gestured to where Arya was patiently showing a young veteran how to adjust the telescope focus. That's your daughter teaching others. That's healing multiplying. She's come so far. They both have. Caleb watched Zoe help one of the younger visitors identify Andromeda. 6 months ago, I couldn't imagine any of this. 6 months ago, you were ready to give up. I was. And then 22 strangers showed up in a blizzard and decided I was worth saving. No, Valentina corrected gently. You decided to open the door. We just walked through it. The courage was always yours, Caleb. We just reminded you it was there. As darkness fell, the real magic began. The retractable roof slid open with smooth precision, revealing a sky thick with stars. Arya had planned the evening around optimal viewing of Jupiter and Saturn, both bright and well-positioned. Jupiter first, Arya announced, making adjustments to the telescope. We should be able to see the 4 Galilean moons, Io, Europa, Ganymede, and Callisto. One by one, visitors took turns at the eyepiece, gasping at the sight of Jupiter's bands and the tiny pinpoints of its moons. Even the skeptics were moved by the direct observation of celestial mechanics they'd only read about. Caleb took his turn and felt his breath catch. There it was, a planet nearly 500 million miles away, visible and real and impossibly beautiful. "This is what you see when you look up?" he asked Arya. "Not exactly. My visual acuity isn't enhanced. But yes, this is the universe I study, vast and orderly and full of patterns most people never notice." She adjusted the telescope for the next viewer. "It makes Earth's problems feel appropriately small." "Not small," Caleb said. "Just manageable. Solvable." Yes, exactly that. The evening stretched into night, filled with laughter and wonder, and the kind of conversations that happen when people look at something bigger than themselves. Veterans talked about finding peace in pattern recognition. Parents of autistic kids shared strategies and hope. Harper's girls asked questions about college and careers and whether they could come back. Around midnight, as the crowd thinned, Caleb found himself alone with Zoe and Arya, the three of them lying on blankets staring up at the Milky Way. "Daddy?" Arya's voice was quiet in the darkness. "Do you remember when you asked if we were going to lose our house?" "I remember. We didn't lose it. We made it better. We made it help people." "We did. I'm glad the storm brought those women. I'm glad we opened the door." Caleb felt Zoe shift beside him, saw her reach out to take Arya's hand. "Me too," Zoe said softly. "I'm really glad you guys opened the door." "Of course we opened it," Arya said matter-of-factly. "Refusing help when it's offered is statistically correlated with worse outcomes. We made the logical choice." "Sometimes the logical choice and the brave choice are the same thing," Caleb said. They lay in silence for a while, watching satellites trace paths across the sky. Finally, Arya spoke again. "Zoe and I calculated something. Want to hear it?" "Always." "If we help 12 families per month through the retreat center, and each family consists of an average of 3 people, and we operate year-round, that's 432 people per year experiencing support and stability they might not otherwise have access to." Arya's voice held quiet pride. "In 10 years, that's 4,320 people. That's a significant impact." "That's assuming consistent booking rates," Zoe added. "But even with conservative estimates, we're looking at thousands of lives touched." Caleb stared up at the stars, thinking about multiplication. How one act of kindness could cascade into hundreds, thousands. How opening a door during a storm could lead to this moment, to this family, to this purpose. "You know what I think?" he said. "I think we're going to exceed those estimates." The retreat center's first official week began the following Monday. A group of 8 veterans and their families arrived for a therapeutic wilderness retreat. Caleb watched them unload from vans, seeing the familiar signs: hypervigilance, defensive postures, the careful assessment of exits and threats. He'd been there. He understood. "Welcome to Black Ridge Lodge," he said, meeting them on the front steps. "I'm Caleb Mercer, Marine Corps, 8 years, medically discharged in 2019. I know some of what you're carrying. This is a safe space to set it down for a while." The immediate recognition in their eyes, the relief of being understood without having to explain, told him everything. This was going to work. Over the next 3 days, Caleb watched transformation happen in small increments. An Army sergeant who couldn't sleep finally rested after a day in the mountains. A Navy corpsman's daughter, nonverbal and anxious, spent hours in the sensory-friendly room Caleb had designed with Arya's input. A Marine with severe PTSD had a breakthrough during a quiet afternoon fishing on the property's small lake. Arya and Zoe ran the evening astronomy programs, teaching visitors about navigation by stars, a skill that resonated deeply with veterans trained in land navigation. The observatory became an unexpected therapeutic space, offering perspective that was both literally and figuratively cosmic. When you look at something 13 billion light years away, Arya explained to a group one night, your immediate problems don't disappear, but they find context. You're part of something infinite and ancient and ongoing. That helps? Asked a skeptical Air Force vet. It helps me, Arya said simply. When my mother left and I didn't understand why, my father showed me the stars. He taught me that some things are too vast to fully comprehend, but that doesn't make them less real or important. Abandonment is like that. Trauma is like that. You can't always understand it, but you can find your place in relation to it. The room was silent. Then the Air Force vet nodded slowly. Yeah, that actually makes sense. By the end of that first week, Caleb had 6 new bookings and 5 referrals. Word was spreading. There was a place in the mountains where broken people could find sanctuary without judgment. Harper returned in November with her full nonprofit cohort, 23 girls ranging from 13 to 18, all with trauma histories, all desperately needing proof that life could be different. She'd coordinated with Caleb to create a weekend program focused on skill building and empowerment. Zoe was instrumental in planning it. She worked with Harper to develop a curriculum that combined practical skills, basic mechanics, outdoor survival, financial literacy, with emotional processing and community building. These girls need to see what's possible, Zoe explained to Caleb while they prepared. They need to see women who survived and thrived. They need to see that trauma doesn't have to define your whole life. Like you're seeing it? Yeah, exactly like I'm seeing it. Zoe smiled. 3 months ago, I was sleeping on my drunk aunt's couch and eating frozen pizza for every meal. Now I've got my own room, a family, a purpose. If I can change that fast, they can too. The weekend was powerful. Harper's girls connected with Arya over shared experiences of feeling different. They learned from Valentina about building success from rubble. They heard from Maria Santos about navigating systems designed to fail you. They spent hours in the observatory with Zoe, learning that the universe was bigger than their pain. On the last night, one of the youngest girls, barely 13, approached Caleb with tears streaming down her face. Is this real? She asked. Is all of this actually real? It's real, Caleb promised, and it's waiting for you whenever you're ready to believe you deserve it. What if I'm never ready? Then we'll wait. Because deserving isn't about being ready. It's about being human. And that's all you need to be. December brought snow and the kind of mountain silence that made everything feel suspended in time. The retreat center operated at full capacity, corporate groups seeking year-end reflection, veteran families finding peace before the holidays, autism support networks discovering community. Caleb hired his first employees, 2 local veterans who understood the mission, and 3 support staff who brought expertise in therapy facilitation and program development. The lodge transformed from a family home with guests into a fully operational retreat center with purpose and structure. Through it all, Arya thrived. The constant flow of new people had initially worried Caleb, but Arya had surprised him. She'd created systems for social interaction, scripts for common conversations, designated quiet times when she could retreat, routines that provided structure amid chaos. She'd learned to navigate her own needs while contributing meaningfully to the center's mission, and Zoe had blossomed. She'd enrolled in online advanced placement courses and was already talking about college programs in aerospace engineering. She'd started a mentorship program with Harper's nonprofit, serving as a peer counselor for younger girls. She'd found her voice and her purpose. On Christmas Eve, Caleb, Arya, and Zoe decorated the lodge together while soft snow fell outside. The retreat center was empty for the first time in weeks. Caleb had blocked the holiday for family time. This is nice, Zoe said, hanging ornaments on the massive tree they'd cut from the property. Quiet. Too quiet? Caleb asked. We could invite people if you want. No, this is perfect, just us. She glanced at Arya, who was organizing ornaments by color and size. Right, Arya? Correct. Optimal family bonding occurs in groups of 3 to 5 individuals. We're within parameters. Arya held up a silver star. This should go on top. It's traditional and symbolically appropriate. Caleb lifted her up so she could place the star, watching as she adjusted it with precise care. When he set her down, she immediately went to the window to observe how it looked from outside. Perfect, she declared. The positioning is geometrically sound. That night, they watched movies and drank hot chocolate and talked about the year that had changed everything. Caleb told stories about his father, about the lodge and its glory days, about the dreams that had built this place. Zoe talked about her dad, about the dirt bikes they'd ridden together, about memories she'd been afraid to touch. Arya explained the astronomical significance of the Star of Bethlehem and calculated the probability of its various historical explanations. It was messy and beautiful and perfectly imperfect. Around midnight, when Arya had fallen asleep on the couch and Zoe was nodding off in her chair, Caleb's phone buzzed with a text from Valentina. "Merry Christmas to the man who saved himself. Proud doesn't begin to cover it." He typed back, "Couldn't have done it without you." "You could have, but I'm glad you didn't have to. That's what community means." Caleb looked around his lodge, at the sleeping girls who'd become his daughters, at the business that had become a sanctuary, at the life that had emerged from rubble. A year ago, he'd been counting down to foreclosure. He'd been drowning in debt and despair, convinced he was failing everyone who depended on him. Now he was here, building something that mattered, raising daughters who were finding their own strength, creating space for healing that multiplied exponentially. The blizzard that had brought 22 strangers to his door had seemed like the final disaster in a series of catastrophes, but it had been something else entirely. It had been the beginning. January brought new challenges and new triumphs. The grant application Caleb had submitted in August came through with funding that doubled his projected budget for specialized programming. A major veterans organization partnered with the retreat center to offer subsidized weekends for military families. 3 different autism advocacy groups booked spring retreats. Maria Santos became a regular presence, bringing other teens who needed what Zoe had found: stability, purpose, family. 2 more teenagers ended up in transitional placements at the lodge, folding into the community with varying degrees of ease. The lodge expanded in ways Caleb hadn't anticipated. It became a training ground for therapeutic hospitality, a model for trauma-informed programming, a case study in what was possible when you built healing around human dignity rather than clinical protocols. Harper's nonprofit formalized a partnership, bringing groups quarterly for skill-building weekends. Valentina's investment group approved funding for a second observatory for younger children. Patricia Chen designed an addition that would house a therapy center and expanded family accommodations. The pattern Arya had identified, help multiplying exponentially, proved accurate. Every person who found healing at Black Ridge Lodge went on to help others. Veterans who'd found peace volunteered to mentor new arrivals. Parents of autistic kids created support networks. Teenagers who'd survived trauma became counselors for younger girls. The multiplication was infinite. One evening in late February, almost exactly a year after the blizzard, Caleb stood on the back deck watching the observatory lights where Arya and Zoe were conducting an observation session with visiting families. The lodge blazed with warmth behind him, full of people finding their way back to themselves. His phone rang. Jennifer, his ex-wife, calling for the first time in 8 months. "I heard about what you're doing," she said without preamble. "The retreat center, everyone's talking about it. It's going well. I'm glad. Really, I am." She paused. "Caleb, I want to see Arya. I know I've been absent, but I'd like to try. If she's willing." Caleb's first instinct was to refuse, to protect Arya from potential hurt. But then he thought about second chances, about people earning their way back, about the multiplication of healing. "I'll ask her," he said. "It's her choice. If she wants to see you, we'll figure it out. But Jennifer, you don't get to hurt her again. She's thriving now. She's happy. If you can't be consistent, if you're not all in, don't start." "I understand. And Caleb, thank you for everything you've done for her, for being what I couldn't be. She's my daughter. That's what parents do." After they hung up, Caleb walked to the observatory. Inside, Arya was explaining proper telescope maintenance to a fascinated audience while Zoe helped younger kids adjust the focus for optimal viewing. "Arya?" Caleb waited until she paused. "Can we talk for a minute?" They stepped outside and Caleb explained the call. Arya processed it with her characteristic logic. She wants to reestablish contact after prolonged absence. What's the statistical probability of sustained engagement versus repeated abandonment? I don't know, sweetheart. People can change, but they can also fall back into old patterns. Do you think I should see her? I think that's entirely your choice. Whatever you decide, I support it. Arya was quiet for a long time, looking up at the stars. Finally, she spoke. I'd like to try, but with boundaries. Scheduled video calls initially. If she maintains consistency for 3 months, we can discuss in-person visits. If she fails to maintain contact, we terminate the arrangement. That sounds reasonable. It's self-protective while allowing for the possibility of growth. Both outcomes are important. Arya looked at him seriously. You taught me that. Opening doors while maintaining boundaries, helping while protecting yourself. It's a difficult balance, but necessary. Caleb pulled her close. You're so wise, baby. When did you get so wise? I observe patterns. You and Valentina and Harper and Maria, you all demonstrate this balance. I simply learned from your examples. That night, Caleb made the call to Jennifer and set up the framework Arya had outlined. Scheduled video calls, clear expectations, defined consequences for inconsistency. Jennifer agreed to everything, her voice thick with emotion and what sounded like genuine commitment. Time would tell if it held. Spring arrived with the kind of explosive beauty that made the mountains feel like they were waking from hibernation. The lodge grounds transformed into color and life. Marcus's crew started construction on the expansion, working around the retreat center's full schedule with practiced efficiency. Arya's 9th birthday fell on a Saturday in April, and Caleb threw her a party unlike any she'd had before. Harper brought her entire nonprofit cohort. Valentina flew in with gifts and enthusiasm. Maria Santos came with 3 of her current placements. Local families who'd been helped by the retreat center showed up with gratitude and celebration. Arya requested an astronomy-themed party with precise specifications, constellation decorations, planet-shaped cake, educational activities about stellar formation. Zoe helped plan every detail, understanding Arya's needs in ways that came from shared experience rather than clinical training. The party was loud and chaotic and perfect. Arya spent most of it wearing her noise-canceling headphones, but she was smiling, engaging, clearly happy. She gave a presentation about the life cycle of stars that held even the youngest children's attention. She opened presents with careful precision, thanking each person with the sincerity that came from really meaning it. As the sun set, everyone gathered in the observatory for a special viewing Arya had planned, a transit of the International Space Station across the face of the moon, visible for exactly 47 seconds. This is rare, Arya explained to the crowd. The alignment has to be perfect. We won't see it again from this location for another 18 months. They counted down together, and at the exact moment Arya had calculated, the ISS appeared, a tiny dot crossing the moon's bright disk, moving with impossible speed and precision. The crowd erupted in applause and wonder. Arya stood at the telescope, beaming with pride and joy, and Caleb felt his heart might burst. This was what he'd fought for. This was what all of it had been building toward. Later, after the guests had left and Arya was asleep clutching a new book about exoplanets, Caleb found Zoe on the back deck. "Good party," she said. "The best. You did an amazing job helping plan it." Arya made it easy. She knows what she wants. Zoe was quiet for a moment. "Can I tell you something?" "Always." "A year ago, I didn't think I'd make it to 16. I was pretty sure I'd end up another statistic, foster kid who aged out with nothing, overdosed or disappeared or just gave up." Her voice was steady, clear. "Now I'm planning for college. I'm helping other girls like I used to be. I have a family and a home and a future I actually want to live into." "I'm so glad you're here, Zoe." "Me too. And Caleb? Thanks for opening the door. Not just to the lodge, to possibility, to believing I was worth saving even when I didn't believe it myself." "You were always worth saving. I just helped you see it." They sat in comfortable silence, watching stars emerge as darkness deepened. Finally, Zoe spoke again. "I've been thinking about something Arya said, about patterns multiplying, about how helping one person creates ripples that reach people you'll never meet." "Yeah?" I want to do that. When I'm older, when I have resources, I want to create spaces like this, places where broken people can learn they're not finished. She looked at him directly. You started something here that's bigger than one lodge. It's a whole philosophy of healing. I want to carry it forward. Caleb felt tears threaten. You already are, Zoe, every day. The summer brought the retreat center's 1-year anniversary. Valentina organized a celebration that filled the lodge to capacity. Investors, partners, families who'd been helped, community members who'd watched the transformation. They gathered in the great room where Caleb had first met 22 strangers during a blizzard. Valentina made a speech about vision and courage and the multiplication of impact. Rebecca presented financial reports showing the center's sustainability and growth. Harper talked about partnerships and the ripple effects of trauma-informed care. Maria discussed the placement success rates for teens who'd found stability at the lodge. Then Valentina handed the microphone to Caleb. He stood before the crowd looking at faces that represented every piece of his journey. Veterans who'd found peace, parents who'd found community, teenagers who'd found hope, investors who'd taken a chance on a broken man's dream. A year ago, he began, I was ready to give up. I'd convinced myself that asking for help was weakness, that I had to solve everything alone, that failing meant I wasn't worthy of the life my father had built. He paused, gathering himself. Then a storm brought strangers to my door, and I made one choice that changed everything. I opened it. I let people in. I admitted I couldn't do it alone. And what happened next wasn't rescue, it was community. It was people with resources and skills and time deciding that my struggle mattered enough to invest in. Caleb looked at Valentina, at Harper, at Rebecca and Sandra and the Colonel and all the others. You taught me that broken doesn't mean finished. You taught me that help isn't weakness. You taught me that healing multiplies when you create space for it. He gestured around the lodge. This place isn't mine anymore. It belongs to everyone who found sanctuary here. It belongs to everyone who will find sanctuary here in the future. It's proof that when you open doors, when you build community, when you refuse to accept that broken people don't deserve wholeness, you create something that outlasts any individual struggle. The applause was thunderous. Arya covered her ears but smiled. Zoe wiped tears from her eyes. Valentina nodded with quiet satisfaction. After the formal celebration ended and the crowd thinned, Caleb found himself alone in the observatory with his daughters. The three of them lay on the observation floor, staring up through the open roof at infinite stars. Daddy? Arya's voice was soft in the darkness. Do you remember when you asked if we were going to lose our house? I remember. We didn't just keep it. We made it mean something. We made it help people. She was quiet for a moment. I'm proud of us. Me too, baby. Me too. Can I say something? Zoe asked. Of course. I've been thinking about that storm, about how those women showing up seemed like random chance. But it wasn't random, was it? You'd already been doing the work, keeping the lodge going despite impossible circumstances, raising Arya alone, refusing to give up even when giving up made sense. The storm didn't save you. It revealed the strength you already had. Caleb absorbed this, feeling the truth of it settle. Maybe, he said slowly. Or maybe it's both. Maybe we're strong enough to survive alone, but we're stronger together. Maybe the real courage is admitting we don't have to do it alone. That's what you taught me, Zoe said, that asking for help isn't giving up. It's choosing to fight smarter. Above them, satellites crossed the sky in geometric precision. Somewhere out there, all 88 constellations mapped the heavens with patterns that had guided humans for millennia. And down here, in a lodge on a mountain, 3 people who'd been broken in different ways had learned that broken was just another word for becoming. Are we going to be okay? Arya asked quietly. Caleb pulled both girls close, feeling their warmth, their trust, their absolute faith that he'd tell them the truth. Yeah, sweetheart, we're going to be more than okay. We're going to be exactly what we need to be, together. Outside, snow that had seemed like catastrophe a year ago fell gently, blanketing the world in fresh possibility. The lodge blazed with light and warmth and purpose. The observatory stood ready to reveal universes to anyone willing to look up, and inside, a family that had been built from strangers and storms And the simple act of opening a door learned the most important truth of all. Sometimes salvation arrives on two wheels wearing leather. Sometimes it looks like a little girl who sees patterns in chaos. Sometimes it comes as a teenager who needs to believe the future can be different. But mostly, salvation is a choice. The choice to open the door, the choice to accept help, the choice to believe that broken people deserve wholeness and that community isn't weakness. It's the only thing strong enough to carry us all home. Caleb Mercer had learned that lesson in a blizzard, and he'd spend the rest of his life teaching it to everyone who walked through his door seeking shelter from their own storms. Because that's what you did when you'd been saved. You opened the door wider, you let the light pour out, and you welcomed every broken soul who needed to know they weren't alone. That was the pattern. That was the multiplication. That was love. And it was enough. It was more than enough. It was everything. Part 6